Meeting of December 2nd, 2019 to order with a moment of silent meditation and salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Again, a motion to send this licensing. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Holiday sales renewals. There are no current or pending holiday sales licenses in need of approval or renewal.
Motion to adjourn as licenses are being convened as council. Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next up, consent agenda. Approved town council meeting minutes of November 18th, 2019. Executive session minutes of November 18th, 2019. Accept the October 28th, 2019 transcript as a record of the Solar DG LLC Clearway Energy Group Edward Carapezza decision. Accept the October 28th, 2019 transcript as a record of the Atlantic Solar LLC and Atlantic Control Systems Inc. 0 Main Street hearing. Set January 6th, 2020 as the hearing date for the renewal of campground licenses. Set January 21st, 2020 as the second town council meeting in January due to Martin Luther King holiday. Set January 21st, 2020 as a hearing date for renewals of commercial haulers licenses. Approved 2019 real estate abatements related to veterans exemptions and Rhode Island housing exemption submitted by the tax assessor. Approved refund resulting from a 2019 real estate double payment submitted by the tax collector.
I'd like to pull town council meeting minutes of November 18th and the October 28th transcript as the record of the Atlantic Solar. Move that we approve the consent.
Okay, I want to take out the October 28th, 2019 transcript as the record of Solar DG. Yeah, take both of them out.
I'm sorry, there aren't two, so you want both of them?
Yes.
Move that we approve the consent agenda with 3 exclusions.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, which one?
I pulled the November 18th because I have to abstain.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve town council meeting minutes of November 18th.
Second?
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions?
Yeah. And then I pulled October 28th, 2019, the Atlantic Solar, page 18, line 2. Page 18, line 2, the straight inverters is supposed to be string inverters.
So November 18th?
Yes.
Oh,
October
the
28th.
transcript, okay.
October 28th.
In regards to 0 Main Street.
Atlantic Solar,
Yes, 0 Main
LLC,
Street, and that was page
18,
18.
line 2, string inverters. Yes, that is all. Motion to.
Paul Scott has
Oh,
some-
sorry.
Yeah, this was the other one.
Which tell us which page?
Okay, page 68, when I spoke, it says, what concerns me is there is the sediment. And maybe the way I talk, it came out as sediment, but I meant sentiment. Sediment, of course, is soil, that type of stuff.
Okay.
So it could have been my gap, so I like to have that corrected as sediment.
What was the line?
On this page 68, right under Vice President Hurst, what concerns me,
Line 9.
Line 9.
Thank you.
sorry about that.
Sentiment, not sediment.
Good catch.
Okay, motion to approve the October 28, 2019 transcript as the record of the Solar DG LLC, and to accept the October 28, 2019 transcript as the record of the Atlantic Solar LLC with the changes.
Second?
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, great. First public forum and only public forum on the regular town council agenda. We're obviously going to have the workshop immediately after that. So, yes, Joe.
Joe Moreau, Old Depot Road. What I wanted to say was at the last council meeting that we had for Chase Hill Road, I want to apologize. I sent Frank an email about this. I met today with Chief Palmer. Residents should not have outbursts, and I apologize for that. I'm in the back of the room getting frustrated, and I said, Frank, who's running the meeting? Especially since the chief had asked us the week prior to that not to do that type of actions. And again, I want to apologize to those two individuals as well as the rest of the council. Believe me, that will not happen again. The other thing is, I want to wish Sylvia good luck with her surgery. It's the only woman that I know 30 years of age is having knee replacements, so I don't know what's going on, but good luck with that. I feel that the only way to learn what's going on in the town is to ask questions, and I want to thank the council members for being patient with that. But one of the things I was confused with, and I don't know if we're going to get into this in the workshop at all, but the solar ordinance was effective January 22nd, 2019. The Carapeza project, the date stamp was May 9th, and it was defeated 4-1. So I guess my question is, I just don't know why we would even have that hearing, or never mind that we have to vote on the hearing when it's clearly, I believe it was 51% was the percentage for that project. So with hearings going forward, are we going to have to go through that whole process? Is that something we'll talk about after?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes, we have to. We're required to do it.
The other thing I wanted to find out about was, we've had a conversation about what can we say during the public forum. And I gave Frank a copy, Kevin a copy, and Sharon has a copy, and Scott had read it. It was, again, I was trying to learn about this, and I spoke to a Kayla O'Rourke, Special Assistant at the Attorney General's office. And she explained to me that, I understand about the litigation, but she explained to me if there's a question for informational purposes, that we could have that question answered. So, again, I don't know if that's something we want to discuss during the public forum. I'm sorry, during the workshop. The last thing I want to say is, when we went through this process with the Old Depot Road project, we were initially told, town council was told, that there was 40-acre dump site that had to be cleaned up. And after we looked at it, had an independent study, it was really 2.5 acres that had to be cleaned up. I would suggest that the town council, and they're already starting to do it, is to get second opinions on some of these projects. For example, there's one project where we were told the reforestation is $115,000. Crossman Engineering came back with an estimate of $463,000. So the numbers really aren't even close. And again, maybe that's something we talk about during the workshop, but it was just those three things that I wanted to mention.
That's good.
Thank you.
There was one more hand up there, maybe? Yes, Carol. Did-
Joe just mentioned that the Crossman Engineering estimate came in at X amount of dollars. How does this information get out to the public that way? Now, I have a leaking issue that started with a confidential letter that I received recently, and I found out that it was leaked, and I just want to know what happens. How
I'm not sure how to go from there. You might want to ask him. I don't go to the planning board meetings, but, talk to Jim.
In which project was Joe talking about? I'm not even sure which one he was talking about, reforestation of the numbers and the town's engineering.
310 Main Street.
Which was it?
310 Main Street, the maximum health. So, I just have a question about that, because I have this idea that some information is supposed to be proprietary, and I don't mind people having that in advance, it's great. But I have a question as a planning board member. I just said to Emily, how did you get that information? She said, She didn't know, so I'm asking the question.
It's new to me too.
Yeah.
I haven't seen
It's
it.
not new to somebody else. There's a few people out there that are getting information. It's quite shocking the things that get out
And
there.
until we see it, we don't know if that's factual. Until we see the document, until you see the document. People can say things, but sometimes people make mistakes. So until we see the document, and you'd see it eventually, we would
I saw it.
eventually, you've already seen it.
It's been distributed to the planning board for our meeting on
Oh,
Thursday.
okay, all right, good.
So,
Oh,
you know, just food for thought.
Yeah.
I worry about information being distributed to
I can assure you it didn't come from me.
yeah. No clue.
Thanks.
Thank you, Karen.
Gonna tell me where you got it?
Not even for coffee.
I tell you, I feel like I live in Providence.
All right. 2 coffees. You say when you're done.
I'll get it right now.
Okay. All right. Anyone else, public forum? Okay.
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. What's that? You want to?
No, that's okay.
All right, so I want to call the Hopkinton Town Council Workshop open for December 2nd, 2019. Community workshop regarding ongoing and planned efforts and initiatives by the town in the areas of general photovoltaic, I forget what that stands for, energy systems, solar project reforestation and decommissioning, bonding guarantees, general economic development planning in Hopkinton, projected educational costs, as well as the town and state revenues. This workshop was a kind of a request from Sylvia and or Sharon with some questions, and obviously the public had some questions, I think, that wanted to be answered in a more, I guess, a less formal process. So what we're going to do is, I know Sharon, I think, and Sylvia have presentations that they want to provide to the public. I have some information on revenue, and I can answer most of the general questions. I don't have any prepared statements, but I think what we'll do is have Sharon and Sylvia do their presentations, and then we'll just start, I guess, if folks one at a time have questions about the presentation. We'll start with that, and then once Sharon is done and the questions are answered, and Sylvia presents your information and the questions are answered, then we'll open it up to just general questions. Hey, Frank, what do you think about this, whatever. But I want to stress, folks, that these workshops can be very productive and constructive if they're done correctly. I don't want any yelling at people from the council to you folks and from you folks to us. It's here to be productive, constructive, and respectful. If it starts going the other way, we'll close it down. So I hope that doesn't happen, but I just want to let you know. So without further ado, Sharon wanted to be first.
Did everyone get a copy?
Right up there in front of you.
All right. As far as I was concerned, the purpose of tonight's solar workshop is to review the history of solar in Hopkinton, update the current status of solar projects, and discuss recommendations to improve the total solar administrative process. I know that we have a lot of new people who are finally becoming interested in what's happening from a solar point of view in Hopkinton, so I thought it would be good to give you guys a history and to go from there. In 2016, several Hopkinton Town Council members thought it would be a good idea to generate revenue for the town by putting solar arrays on the town's Stubbtown Road landfill. And as you can tell now, if you read, the governor is really kind of pushing that too, putting solar on landfills, they call it disturbed areas, not necessarily doing it in a residential zone. Okay, so the town council approved the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 134, zoning amendment titled Non-Residential photovoltaic solar energy systems on July 18th of 2016. They also approved the Farm Viability Ordinance Amendment titled Farm-Based Photovoltaic Solar Energy Systems. It considered putting solar on a maximum of 3 acres of a farm based on its size. So that, if you fast forward, you'll see that our new solar ordinance in January is now limiting something that was originally zoned residential to 3 acres. That's kind of, we were trying to tie that in and try to be fair on both sides. On August 10, 2016, after receiving an electrical interconnection cost estimate of $1 million per mile for the Stubbtown Road project, the town considered the estimate to be prohibitive and the good idea to generate revenue to be no longer viable. Then,
did you want us to do anything along your way or just finish?
Whatever.
Yeah, let it
I'm
finish.
okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll make it easy.
Three acres.
Okay. On January 9, 2017, the town council discussed placing non-farm solar projects on residential land zone RFR 80. This would require major zoning, comprehensive, and land use map changes. And then on May 8, 2017, the comprehensive plan and land use map were updated. And so that's the third page in. If you look at the third page, okay, you'll see that the only place that you could, without doing residential, the only place you could put solar was on the purple and the red. That's commercial and manufacturing. So you can see a small amount of Hopkinton could be used. And they were mostly found near exit 1 and exit 2 up of I-95. Any solar projects located in these areas, the commercial and the manufacturing, did not need town council approval. So if you see things going up in those areas, they don't need town council approval. And also with the farm viability ordinance, when farmers put an acre here, an acre there of solar, they do not have to go through the town council. All right? So that's kind of how things just sort of started popping up. All right. On January 22nd, 2019, the town council approved a revised code of ordinance, chapter 246, the non-residential photovoltaic solar energy systems code of PSDS, which replaced chapter 134. The revision limits solar projects in residential zones needing a zone change to a maximum of 3% or 3 acres. Okay. So, where do we stand today? If you look at the fourth page, okay, which Emily did, this is where all of our proposed, approved, denied projects. So you can see that we have been inundated with solar projects. And also, if you look at the last page, this is the Hopkinton Solar Development overview from the Planning Department as of November 4th. You can see the projects that received zone changes, the commercial manufacturing, the farm viability. So there's 19 of those in total. And if you look to the right, I put it in what their kilowatts were, or their megawatts. And if you come all the way down to the bottom, you'll see that at this point we have approved or allowed 94.18 megawatts. And the town uses 99 megawatts. So we have not replaced our energy by 94%. And so in my opinion, I think we should be done, at least with residential, making any more residential changes. That's the way I feel. All right. Okay, so Hopkinton, the last thing on number 9, Hopkinton is again considering creating a town-owned solar project on Stubbtown Road, landfill. If it comes to fruition, it will be well into the future before this happens. We are working with DEM and evaluating the property to make sure that we meet all of their requirements, and that's going to take a little time. So, for the future, it's true that the eventual results of the previous town council's plans will be an increase in town revenue once the completed projects come online. And there will also be one-time infusions of cash due to fees and permits. But the actual cause of Hopkinton's cash shortage remains unaddressed, and in the meantime, many needed town projects go begging. Just even the fact that we could only do 94 trees, or a little bit more, 97 trees. We could only afford to take that much down because we don't have a lot of money. And yet there's many more trees that need to come down from a safety point of view. So, I mean, that's just one thing that we have been able to do. It's a fact that even if all the solar projects were online and providing the town with revenue in 2020, the town might still be looking for revenue. It's also true that the receipt of these revenue increases is dependent on when and if a project is completed. It's dependent on when reappraisals take place, and thus when those tax revenues become payable. The town is not suddenly going to become hundreds of thousands of dollars richer. It will be realized in pieces and in the future. Just for you to know, the town assessor reassesses the panels, the acres that the panels are on. So if there were just vacant land, when they put the panels on, they will charge $45,000 an acre where the panels are. And then multiply that by $20 and whatever, 68 cents, whatever is our tax rate. So that's the increase. That's the increase that we're going to get over time. Okay, just so you know. So anyway, these are my recommendations. Number 1, I think that the town clerk's office should verify with the Secretary of State's business database that all solar applicants have valid business licenses at the time that their applications are submitted. Number 2, the notification of all solar project abutters should be increased from 200 feet to 500 feet from the proposed project. Number 3, the town manager's office should notify all residents of solar project applications, planning board meetings, and town council meetings via robocalls, in addition to newspaper advertising, website postings, and mailings. I think we really do have a communication problem in it. And I know that the town is doing what it's required to do, but I don't think it's enough. I think we need to do more. So, I wanted to ask you, Bill, how do you do those calls when you say, you do calls to let people know that there's going to be a vote, and a vote at the town hall. And you also call if there's emergencies, and so I don't know how you do that.
We have a system.
We have a contract with program,
Okay.
and there's a system that you use to take those calls and they launch those calls at a specific date at a specific time.
Okay.
It's really an emergency broadcast system that we kind of stretch for the elections.
Okay. And do all the residents know to give you their phone numbers? Or
It's all built into the system.
okay. Okay.
There's
I was just curious.
about 4,000, when the calls go out, they go out to about anywhere between 3,600 and 4,000 locations.
Okay.
Yes.
So that was one of the things I thought.
But Bill, do they still have the method of, you can go online and add multiple numbers, so you still do it online?
Yes.
Yes. And is that through the emergency management department, correct, EMA? I believe it's on the EMA.
No, I think it's through program.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right, you're right, okay.
Okay. Number 4, the PSES solar ordinance should state that the owner of the property, in addition to the developer of the project, the builder of the project, and their successors, will be held responsible for the proper installation and maintenance of the solar projects. I just want to make sure that the person who owns the land needs to feel a sense of responsibility. That's the point I'm trying to make for that. Number 5, the town should prohibit the cutting of trees that would cause the project to be seen by abutters. The builder of the project should coordinate the cutting of trees with the town representative on site to ensure that no excess trees are cut. Number 6, the planning board should require all approved solar projects that required a zone change from RFR 80 to follow more detailed scrutiny. I don't know, I'm still not sure of the difference between development plan review and master development. But master plan review. At any rate, I just want to make sure that all of the projects are done and that we look at them very carefully and make sure that we are imparting what we require from the developer and the person who's going to be building the project. Number 7, when the developer sells the solar project to the builder, the town has to be notified in writing. And in addition, there should be a meeting with the town representative, the builder, and the developer to review the project's specific ordinance and our general solar ordinance to ensure there's a smooth handoff and everyone fully understands the town's expectations of the project. Number 8, the planning board who sets the reforestation bond for solar projects should obtain the total 20-year estimated costs up front. I just think we ought to get it all up front. While we have a developer there, I'm not going to be all that excited about hoping that the market will increase it in value. The board should also request that the developer and builder agree that any excess bond money left over after actual reforestation would be loaned to the town. Number 9, the planning board should be setting the decommissioning bond on future projects after further research. We should not be tied to the formula that we have used in the past. Number 10, proposed projects that are already in commercial or manufacturing zones should also be reviewed by the planning board with the abutters' concerns and visibility concerns in mind. And in particular, there is a Frontier Road, it's going to be 14 megawatts. Was right next to the boneyard. That's already in a manufactured zone, and so they don't have to come here. And how would you know? How would you know? The guys that live on Maxon Hill right across from that. How would you know? All of a sudden it would just be, you'd see construction. So I just think the only people who will know is the planning board, because they still have to go through the planning board. So I'm just saying we really need to scrutinize even the ones that are allowed by right. We need to really watch those. Number 11, during solar project presentations to the town council, the time used by the developer should be tracked. Then the same amount of time should be made available for public comment from the residents. I think the practice kind of seems like the developer on day one, you know, they take whatever amount of time they have that they want, and then there's very little left over for public comment. But I think that the council owes the public the right to absolutely continue it to the next time, and then and have the public make their comments, give them the same amount of time. And number 12, we need an economic development council that brings all the residents together to develop projects that the citizenry has bought in on and will support with open conversation regarding the costs and benefits to the residents. We should not be relying on developer-inspired revenue projects that serve mostly to divide us.
Okay. Does council have any questions for Sharon?
It was number 3, and I completely disagree with number 3. I know that there may have been comments, but that's why we're still working on the landfill, to put solar on it. Whether or not there was a cost on Stubbtown Road. Number 3, and, yeah, about the landfill.
What's number 3?
Number 3, at the
Under
top,
history.
first page. So I just wanted you to know that that's not true. The council never by consensus or voting disagreed not to pursue it, and we are pursuing, doing what we need to do so we can put solar on the landfill.
That's correct. Okay. I just wanted to agree with Sylvia if that's absolutely correct. Continue.
Yes, sir.
Well, maybe in 2016 it was put on the back.
No, it was never put on the
No,
back.
Okay.
never
All right.
Bill.
I see it.
We're still actively working on that. Sullivan Jim lived there, and it never had anything to do with the planning department or the town manager's office or the council declaring it prohibited. That was a statement that was made by Anthony Delvacario.
Right.
When he did some engineering and design work down there, he felt that the cost was prohibited.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I like that.
We are still actively working on it to try to make that happen.
Any other questions for Sharon? All right, I'll open up to the public. Any
You
questions?
want me to have this one and then open it up completely?
Well, they might get confused with different.
It would be easier for me to just get this done and over with, and then we can open it up. Because a lot of the things that Sharon talks about, I have additional information on, that's all.
So, all right, so. You're right. Okay, Sylvia, go ahead. You have the floor.
All right, there was another document handed out, and there were limited copies, so there was the one from Sharon, but there was also another one that had maps, information about Cherico, the budget, revenue, etc. If anybody really wants a copy of that, and they look at it and want to bring one home, the clerk can always make a copy for you this week, if anybody wants it. I just wanted to talk about some of the projects that have been done by the town council. There were, in the beginning, when we first started out, there were 2 sandbanks. I'm not going to go in any particular order. We did start with a sandbank down in Hope Valley. It's a very small project. It was supported by everyone in the hearing. It was just not a very good piece of land. So there's solar on it. It's behind the fruit stand and across the street from the ballpark, on Bank Street. The second one was a project over on 216 in the neighborhood of Barbers, where there was a sandbank and they wanted to continue using it. And everybody, eventually it went solar. It is a little bit larger than the one in Hope Valley, but it's still a small project. So that was supported by the neighbors. They didn't want trucks going on. They knew, well anyway, so that was supported. Then we dealt with also Route 91. It was a project that referred to as Pelican. It was originally approved for an RV park. It was RFR 80, and instead they decided to look at solar. It was supported at the hearing. The other one, the next one, 310 Main Street, Maxon Hill. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Maxon Hill, not get into legal issues, but just talk about the project and maybe how many acres it is, just a few details. That project, Sharon talked about the map and had provided a map with her handout. There's also, the town has a future land use map. And they designated this particular 310 Main Street as a mixed use, mixed use, what do they call it? Mixed use, was it mixed special? Just mixed use, which would include residential. The thinking at the time, and this was a long time ago when Zork, I believe it was Zoning Law Review Committee, which Barbara Capalvo was a member of, I think it was 2004 and 5, right around there. And they worked for years on the Exit 1 zoning to look at what could happen there. So they came up with these future land use map, and they had designated areas where they thought that, it happened to be around exit 1, that it was exit 1, that there was land there that could be changed over to a variety of things. And the 310 was mixed use, which I mentioned. It was an idea back then, before this even came up, but back when Barbara worked on that committee, the thinking was that if you had a mixed-use village, or you had a mixed use, you could have business below and affordable housing on top.
And residents above.
But people started thinking about it, and I can't say the majority of people. All I know is that some of the comments that I heard back, and I agreed with, was that do we really want kids playing in parking lots? So the idea of mixed use kind of floundered, I think. It just hangs there on the future land use map. But there have been other changes that were suggested in Exit 1. And as a matter of fact, in our comprehensive plan, they have a list of properties that are inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And those, and I put a copy in here. One of the lots, there's quite a few, and many of them are around Exit 1. One of them was 310 Main Street, that it's inconsistent, and that it should go in keeping with the future land use map, that it should go from RFR 80 to mixed use. So when it came before the council, that was actually a 3-year project. But when it came before the council, the list of abutters, there was another piece of paper that I included, and I'm sorry I dropped it in the water on the way in, but there were let's see how many, there were 3 legal abutters that attended the hearing for 310 Main Street when we had the hearing on whether to go solar or not. There were 3 legal abutters, but they represented 6 properties. Of the people that spoke, there was 150 Maxon Hill. Now, the transcript said Mr. Brazier, B-R-A-I-S-I-E-R. The owner of the property is listed as Patricia DeBigari. Is anyone here?
Debegaire is a correct.
Debegaire, thank you. But I just wanted to note that maybe they misspelled the name, but 150 Maxon Hill was represented at the hearing. The other person that attended the hearing was 278 Main Street. That's Mr. Perlwitz. And Perlwitz, and also Ron, who's a member of our planning board. He spoke in favor of the project. Mr. Rando was also there. He was in favor. He owns 4 properties. Pleasant Street properties, Ashway Investments. There's 3 of those properties along Maxon Hill and Frontier Road. So of the 3 abutters that did attend, there was no one that spoke against it. Now, the 150 Maxon Hill did have some questions, and one of them, he wanted to know, for instance, the depth of soil to ledge. But no one spoke against it. So far, up until 310 Main Street, we've been approving solar projects that were in neighborhood and legal, and by the illegal abutters were in favor of. It wasn't until we came up until Old Depot that people in that area, they received the card. And I wanted to talk about the cards too. They attended the hearing. More and more people came. They were not in favor of it. Old Depot was not approved. Brushy Brook was not approved, and Carapeza recently was not approved. But the council did approve 5 projects. The other one they approved, of course, was Skunk Hill, the Skunk Hill project in Hope Valley, which was not supported by almost all the legal abutters, but that was approved. So prior to the Old Depot, things seemed to be supported. So that project on Maxon Hill, just because Sometimes some people might say something, and if it gets said enough, you might think you might believe it. It's 130, just briefly, it's a 130-acre project. 70 acres will remain as is, that's whether it's forested or wetlands or whatever. Not more than 58 acres or less than 55 will be used for the solar farm. Now, that's from the transcript. I also know that the planning board scaled back the project in certain areas based upon characteristics of the land or the soil or whatever. So the planning board in their review did make changes, which is fine. That's what they do. So aside from all of that, I wanted to share with you, I don't want to be condescending, but some people, if you ever get one of these little green cards from the town, and there's something in there, it's going to be zone change, or something's going on in town, if you ever get one of these, and you sign it, return it, please go to the meeting. And as Sharon had recommended, and I agree, that we should increase the radius from, it was one of the comments that came out of the public, increase the radius from 200 to 500. That seemed to be the thinking. And in order to do that, we'd have a hearing on it, and people could say yes or no, or up or down. But I think when we do that, you'd also think about it and say, well, in what instances? You don't want it for wine and cheese parties and little things around town, but I would think you'd want it for any zone change in a residential area. I think that's where you want the 500. So when we only had 3 people show up for 310 Main Street, no, 3 people spoke. There may have been more people that attended, they just didn't speak, but 3 people spoke. If we go to 500, maybe we'll pick up a few more, or maybe we would have picked up a few more. So I think that's doable. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is people want to know, why would you do these things? Why did we do it? And aside from solar replacing, or solar meaning we're going to use less fossil fuel and all of that. And if the property checks out, it's the issue of assuming everything's fine, the property checks out, but what is the revenue? Why would a town, why do we want to do these things? And so I provided some background information about Charahoe. And the finance director put together a copy of some financials, and all he did is he went back 10 years. He showed what Hopkinton's budget is, the school budget. Right here. I gave it to you. Lisa has copied it, so it's all in there. Yep, it's part of there. Yep, it's in there. The Hopkinton school budget over 10 years is 1.747 million increase. And Hopkinton state education aid decreased by 617,580. So, and actually, the 10-year change of 1.747, you know, if you look back 10 years, these particular 10 years, it's not so bad, honestly. If you look back at a few different other years, the school budget has become very erratic as far as what is Hopkinton going to pay every year. And we've had wild enrollment changes. Now, enrollment's been going down since 2001. We've lost over 900 students at Charahoe. There's enrollment information in here for you. The current enrollment for 2020 is 3,135. And Charlestown goes down in enrollment, I think, consistently. Richmond has, it used to be that Hopkinton had a higher enrollment and Richmond had a little bit less. Well, Richmond outpaced us. At the same time, so Richmond takes a bigger percent. It's funny the way we pay. Well, it's not funny, it's unfortunate, the way we pay Charahoe. And we've got some information here that you can take home and read it and look at it, get a grasp. We have 3 different tax rates. Richmond has one for school tax, just the school tax. Charlestown's, of course, very low. if you have a home in Hopkinton that's valued at, I don't know, $500,000, and you pay a certain amount in taxes, just the school part, not the house, just the school taxes. So you pay a certain amount. If you took a $500,000 assessment from Charlestown, you're going to pay half as much in taxes because their tax rate is so low. Ours is so much bigger. Richmond's is so much bigger. We have had enrollment shifts that, as much as one particular year, 80 students, which is, I don't know how that sounds, but compared to every single year, this amount of students, sometimes it's 40, it might be 20, it's fluctuated, but it's going down, down, down every year. There was a year when, depending on who lost the most students, you would end up being the lucky ones. If in this particular year, for instance, Charlestown has gone down, Richmond went down, Hopkinton has gone up by 24 students. If you take 24 and multiply it by 18,000, if that's what we're paying, or 19,000 per student, you come up with a number. That's not what Chariho is going to, that's not the cost. The cost will be much greater, because when you take the whole budget, whether it's 60 million or 55, or whatever that budget is at Chariho, we pay a percent. We were paying down to 35% point something, because Richmond had gone beyond us. They had more students, so they were paying a little more piece of the pie. Charlestown's down like 28% or something. So if you got all these millions to pay and you haven't lost students faster than the other towns, you're going to be the one that's going to pay the bigger amount. Was it, I think it was like 3 years ago or so, Richmond was looking at a 1.1 million, just like that. And you don't know until the budget is released from Chariho. We know the numbers because Lisa, through the town clerk's office, they verify how many students we have in town. And we went up by 24. If you drive over on every street all over town, you see new houses being built, building permits are being pulled, and a few people think that's okay, but mathematically it's very expensive for us. So Hopkinton seems to be the popular town to move to, and I hope it doesn't stay that way, because we just can't afford it. So I'll quickly get off of this topic, and all I'm going to tell you now is some of the amounts of money that we've had issues with Chariho, and they have been receptive. And the year-end fund balance, their surplus has fluctuated. It's gone from they're having $3.5 million to having $7.7 million to having, and then drops, and it goes down, and then it goes back up. The high number is $7.5 million, and it's.
What's the solar workshop?
Okay,
This is too much detail.
All right, I will stop.
It's not just solar though.
Way off topic.
Hold
We
on.
understand the school budget is important, but the history and this level of detail is not specific to what we're here for.
I'd like to answer.
An overview would be best at this point.
Okay, we were asked, why? Why were we approving solar projects? Excuse me, you can speak all you want when I'm done. But we did it for, and honestly, why? It's because we need the revenue. These projects, up until Old Depot, were supported. So we did get that done. Skunk Hill was not supported. All the other projects were supported. You can read the transcripts. No one spoke against 310 Main Street. No one spoke. It's in the transcript, so I will stop talking, and that's why I talk about Chariho, because we have erratic cost school budget. So that's all.
All right, so I think Barbara, do you have a few comments on this?
I just had a few comments on Councilor Davis's comments. One was on recommendation number 4, asking that their successors be held responsible for the proper installation and maintenance of the solar project. That's something that is already done because it's the successors in interest. So when they buy a property, their successors in interest, which means they have to follow the same thing. But that's something I think we already have.
Yeah,
So
I just want to
I
make sure
think
that
it's
the owner was
Oh, it's
included.
a good idea, but indeed, we do have that is continuing. I have a question on number 8. The planning board sets the reforestation bond, and you thought they should obtain the total 20-year estimated cost up front. I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that, that's really up to the planning board. But if they get the 20-year estimated cost up front, then who gets the interest? So you would say we would get the cost plus the
Yeah,
interest
that's what I said.
would belong to the town.
Right.
I'm not sure how that works as far as finance goes, because I did ask Brian Russell about that at one point, and he felt we really couldn't do that because of the way he had to record it for the town. So we can look into it. But indeed, I'm not sure we can physically do that, although I understand the reasoning because I went that at one point too, and I didn't get it. On the time, number 11, the time made available for public comment by the residents, I do agree that the developers do seem to take the entire time, but I know we always have continued it to allow the public to speak, and we have allowed all the public to speak until the very end, including continuing the meetings if necessary. And I think that we'll continue to do that. We have not stopped any of you from talking from any of these solar projects, even though it took forever. And I do agree with that.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, those are my only comments.
Okay.
Oh, I have a comment on Sylvia. When I was on the Economic Development Commission and on the rezone, the reason we took a look at finding other places where we can do commercial development, we looked at exit 1 and at exit 2. Because those were the primary places we wanted to develop, so it wouldn't be developed all over town. But those are major exits, and they are going to be eventually developed as commercial or manufacturing. One of the reasons we use mixed use is because we had at exit 1 commercial and manufacturing, and we thought mixed use would be a step down because we're going into residential for Ashaway. And the idea of mixed use would be retail and residential, and it would be a step down as we got into residential. When you look at the town of Hopkinton and you realize we have 72 acres out of 36,000 acres that are commercial, that's why we are looking for more spaces that can be made commercial. And generally, what we try to do is look at either a major road or exit 1 and exit 2. And many of you are against it no matter what. But at some point, Sylvia and Frank and I have tried to work on where do we find money to support our budgets so that we don't support our budgets only on the back of the residences. Solar is one of the ways. And one of the reasons we looked at solar is because Hopkinton does not like commercial development. And most of us are agreeing with you. And most of the time, you didn't want gas stations, you haven't wanted welcome centers, you didn't want studios, you didn't want Six Flags, you didn't want retail, you didn't want big boxes. And this council agreed with you. But we have to have something. You don't want healthcare facilities because it brings drugs that could go in the water. We have great problems finding commercial that the town would approve. And most of the commercial that has come forward, you don't like. It would be good to know what you would like to have. Low income is also one of those areas where the town doesn't want to see a lot of low income development. So the Commercial Economic Development Commission has a real problem trying to find what you want to see. Because most, you'll all be able to talk, but that is the reason that we looked at solar, because it can be 12 feet high, and quiet, and silent, and no kids, and no septic, and no tar, and no parking lots, and not 3-story buildings. It's one of the quietest things that is something we can tax a lot and not tax our citizens. So it's why we look at it and why we think of it, not just for renewable energy, but because it's the quietest thing I can imagine putting in. And we can continue to tax it higher and higher because the state does. So those are my comments to Sylvia. That's it.
Okay. All right, so now the public, okay, so,
Okay, I didn't get a chance to talk to anyone with the town council. I wish people would respect that and understand that.
You just have to let the president
you
know.
still let me know, Scott?
Okay, I'm sorry, but you know, it's like I'm an invisible man.
No, I-
I'm sorry if I overreacted, but a lot of people try to think that it was from King Solomon. The fact of
Go ahead, Scott, you have the floor.
Okay, this thing with notification of people, we can have a bulk mailing on occasion to address that need. Bulk mailing reaches a lot of people. And the thing, and I'm not going to go through everything, I know people want to speak, and they probably think we're long-winded, and they're probably right. But the fact of the matter is, in order to command respect, you have to give respect. We have a planning board, and the council in repeated cases have not paid attention to their unanimous recommendation. That's a fact, that's not a political cheap shot. It's also important to realize that we have limited town staff, and what we have to do to strengthen town government. Charahoe gets a lot of money, our town government is starved, and the town government itself needs support, so a lot of town functions are done better. And the fact of the matter is, around 25% of the town taxes in this town go to general government versus the schools. And Richmond's worse off than us, and Charleston has a lot of flexibility. And I don't have a problem with economic development. What concerns me about all this talk about economic development, something that's going to give you 50,000, 100,000, that's a drop in the bucket for the real issue affecting the finances of this town. And also the state enacted a budget cap, and we've had regional school districts. Charahoe School District first was approved in 1958 when I was 5 years old, and it wasn't totally full length. And I believe we had an MGT study, and that study concluded there should be an equalized tax rate in the Charahoe district and should be phased in. You had an outside consultant who made that recommendation. They had no ties, and that's something we really have to look at, whether we have to sue for it or not. I'm not advocating that right now, but it should be looked at. I don't know if it would be successful or not, but that would be something that we should at least consider doing. But you know, if you're a good politician, you get a feel of the public, and you know, if you really know how people think, you can almost anticipate how people will view certain things. That's an aptitude that you gain in politics. And the last thing I'm going to say is this situation with affordable housing and how it's relevant. We're very good at meeting that goal, but my concern with solar is the state, how are they going to treat Hopkinton with all this work that we've done? And Councilor Davis put forward how much we've addressed our own energy needs. Is other cities and towns going to be allowed to pass on that? You know, if you're going to hold somebody accountable and responsible, a city or town, all cities and towns are supposed to be responsible, not just Hopkinton and a few other towns. And that's really what I think the problem is. And other than that, that's all I'm going to say for now. And I'd like to recognize Senator Morgan for taking the time to be here tonight. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so you guys have heard what your council has said. I guess whoever has a series of questions, I guess, perhaps if you want to come to the podium, we'll take one at a time, and however you want to start.
Thank you, Harvey. I just saw again in Sharon's notes here what I consider to be a major mistake in her calculations. She refers to us as needing 99.8 megawatts per day, and that should be megawatt hours per day.
And on that basis, we already supply, and using this new number of 94.18 megawatts capacity, taking that at face value, we're already supplying well over 400% of the needs of the town with the solar projects that are already approved. I'd just like to be working with the correct numbers. So I'm saying it's much higher than what Sharon says. And I would say that if this is an important thing to know, it would be, maybe it'd be simple just to get the town engineer to give you to run the calculations in case I'm wrong or in case Sharon's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, but she had her hand up, yes.
Vermont here, 100 Maxon Hill Road. I'd just like to, I'd like to rebut this idea that nobody came to the Maxon Hill Road meeting. I was there at the initial meeting, and I've said this, and I've stood here and said this to you people before. That item was pulled from the agenda on the date that it was given for us to be here on that letter. And then and I didn't even come to rebut it, argue about it. I wanted to hear about it. I came in with an open mind to hear what it was about. The other, you can see from the previous projects that are here, they're like 1 acre, 3 acres. There is nothing here in that letter that indicated this was going to be a massive scale project. It's only 58 acres out of what, 138? But they're all pushed right up under our noses. There was, and I said this to you at the last meeting, Sylvia. I said, I was there, it was pulled from the agenda, and here it is, once again, we're being told nobody said anything against it. There was a hell of a lot of people that were against Skunk Hill, and it got approved anyway, so I don't even know why that's an argument in the first place. So that's just my 2 cents on this document.
Thank you. Yes, John.
Hi, John Pennypacker with on 186 Lawton Foster Road North. And I don't want to spend too much time on what has happened, but I do want to drive home 2 points. The first is, and Ms. Davis, thank you for starting this conversation, providing this document. Point number 5, the reason that the developers didn't need to come back to town council for approval is because every single solar project in town was approved by town council via previous ordinances or something else. So they didn't need a special exception, but the council approved every single solar project. The second one is on 310 Main Street. The planning board provided an opinion to the town council of how it felt about that project. A lot of people spoke at that meeting. It might have been a good idea to consider those opinions when you say that no one spoke out against it, because I spoke out against it. Members of the planning board spoke out against it. And I think it's fair to say that we're not the only ones. So I just want to get that out and past me. And then try to focus on the future and what we can do differently, what we can do better. The town doesn't seem to have a strong appetite for solar power, at least from what I've seen, from what I've read. I don't think we should begin this process with the notion that the town needs solar. We don't. I get it, we need revenue. Everybody needs revenue. We don't need solar. If only 73 of the however many acres are commercial, that's fine. Many of them are vacant. They can be filled by other commercial things that bring jobs. There's a development in Exit 2. It brings professional jobs. It's wonderful. Why wouldn't we seek more of that? It seems a little bit foolhardy to fill the land with solar panels because it's worthless to a developer at that point. Why would I want to put a corporate complex that's surrounded by solar panels and accessible that can support other businesses that would then support my employees and staff? So some of the other problems that we face when it comes to development is these developers don't have anything. They don't own anything. They're not even people. They're all LLCs. They have one asset, and that's the solar panel. So when we talk about ensuring that they have some sort of stake in the town, we need to hold them to it. these bonds that we ask them to put up, they don't belong to us, they belong to them, that's contingency money. So hey, if this thing goes under, we have at least that bond because they own nothing else. You can't sue them for anything, they're gone. And so, Mr. Moreau pointed out that there was an estimate for the planning board packet for the reforestation bond. The project at 310 Main Street is underway, and not all the conditions that the council set are being followed or even in place, one of which is the reforestation bond. The developer came to the town and said, oh, we think it's going to cost about $100,000, so how's that sound? And the planning board had the wisdom to go out and get some quotes. And the first quote that came back is more than 4 times that amount. So there's also, in addition, we're finding out that to recycle solar panels, it costs probably more than 4 times what the developer initially said too. The town didn't have the foresight to check that out. So I think getting quotes for these things is probably a good idea in the future. It's the way the state procures anything, they get free quotes. And so our bonds should be high, really high, which puts us at another problem. Residents shouldn't bear the liability for these developments. So if it turns out that these companies do dry up and they go away, and they leave us with acres and acres of decrepit solar panels, what do? It's going to cost me money. And what's worse is, the planning board is now on the hook to come up with a reasonable deforestation bond, a reasonable amount. That word reasonable bothers me quite a bit. I think it should be high reasonable, but here's the problem. Me, the town, is being sued by people because this isn't going the way it's supposed to go. And if we come up with a reasonable amount, the developer is going to sue me, the town, for coming up with an unreasonable amount. I'm stuck. And I look to the 5 of you to come up with solutions to prevent me from being on the hook for these projects. As a resident, I shouldn't bear any sort of liability, and neither should my neighbors. And there are a few things that just kind of stick in my craw that go along with this that I think we could also improve. The developers ignoring the town's rules, I think is a problem. Working outside of the hours is a problem. Starting before they have all of the approvals in place is a problem.
Fine.
And what's more is the property tax rate for all of these solar panels is the exact same tax rate that I pay as a resident for my house. I don't think that's fair either. Many municipalities have a higher rate than commercial, and I think we should probably do that too. And I guess the last thing, if we want businesses in this town, what kind of businesses we want? Would be the ones with jobs. The ones that provide Hopkinton residents with jobs, that provides exchange of currency within town. Not stuff that's run by an out-of-state developer on the internet.
Hey, John, can I just comment on a couple things on what you said?
Sure.
You just, so just to regroup on the reforestation, the town council doesn't set those amounts, the planning board does, right?
Yeah, that's what's specified.
So we just want to be clear that everyone knows out there, it's not us, it's the planning board that does that.
No, the town council set the decommissioning bond at $240,000.
Yeah, you mentioned reforestation.
And the town council specified that the planning board come up with a reforestation bond in a reasonable amount. The developer said that reasonable amount should be $100,000, and Crossman said it should be $400,000 something like that.
So the planning board would institute that if they feel that's what they want, right? It's not a council decision, it's a planning board decision.
That particular decision,
Correct.
that amount was a planning board decision.
Correct. And then you mentioned all solar projects were approved by the town council. We've only approved 5.
Which ones did you not approve?
We didn't
All the
approve.
ones by right.
Hold on. Let me- I want to state the record correctly. We approved 5. 2 gravel banks and 3 others. The other 3 were 310 Main Street, the Pelican property on 91 Alton Bradford Road, and Skunk Hill. That's it. We did not approve zone changes now. Again, the only thing that comes before us is zone changes from RFR80 to commercial special. We declined Townsend, Carapezza, and Brushy Brook. Okay? So we didn't approve all of them. The other things that have been approved by right are commercial and manufacturing and farm viability. So I'm not sure I understand what you meant by all projects were approved by the council. So I need you to restate what that meant.
Every project that is being developed in town has been approved by town council. So, for example, and thank you, Dennis Davis, for providing the timeline. In 2016, when the town council amended the farm viability ordinance to include solar panels, the town council approved every single solar project that's built as part of the farm viability ordinance. Is that not accurate? I mean, they couldn't do it before this. So by town council action, it was approved.
Right, for farming, to help the farmers.
Farming.
Right.
At
Well,
that
I
same
disagree,
time,
it had to go to the planning board. Every one of those farm viability, everything, all Enchanted Forest, the farms called Spadon, Reynolds,
Simplicity,
they all
tenure.
had to go before the planning board
right,
for approvals, okay? Now, the town council approved an ordinance
right.
that allows farmers to be able to do solar under certain conditions. But that was all a part of a team effort between the planning board members and the town council.
To help the
These
farmers.
ordinances,
Mhm.
I mean, it's not,
So it's, you know,
we
it's
don't
finger point, John.
just decide things on our own. It's a
It's to
group
help
effort.
farmers.
All I'm saying is that every single one is made possible because of action of the town council.
And the
Before this
planning board.
time,
And the planning
And the
board.
planning board. You have to add the.
even if the planning board said yes or no, the town council can and has demonstrated that it will do what it wants.
Only if it's a zone change.
Only in this
Zone
case
change
because
only.
of the way that you've structured the ordinances. I mean, it's way
Hold
hard.
on. We've only approved 5 zone changes. The town council, that's it. Okay?
And
So if you want to argue about the point that, you know, because we created a farm viability ordinance to help farmers
Mhm.
to put up 1 acre of solar like Reynolds and everyone else, you want to point the finger at us for doing that, fine. I will take that hit all day long because you know why it really helps them? If you want to go talk to Mr. Reynolds tomorrow, I'll take you over there and tell you how much he was delivering papers and delivering milk at Lewis's farm because he needed money. Now that helps folks, okay? And that's what I think we need to do. Now, your point is taken as far as, you know, we may have created the ordinance that enabled that to happen, but I think with good reason. I think we had the benefit of the town and the farmers at the heart of our decision. So we've only approved 5 projects now, and 3 were declined.
Oh, and the
Zone
conservation
change.
commission too.
And the Conservation Commission, which-
It's okay. I'm not suggesting that every solar project is bad. I think you're misunderstanding.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, I heard the town council say for an hour that, you know, no one knew and that we only approved 5. And the reality of it is that they were all enabled by the town council. And I'm not saying if it's right or if it's wrong. I'm not making any judgment on any of these. And for the record, I agree. If we can save if we can put an acre of solar to save 100 acres of farmland, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. Unfortunately, not all of the projects that have been approved via this legislation have gone that favorably for the town.
And then just one other point, you had mentioned the tax, tangible tax is the same that you pay. It's not.
Property tax.
Right, it's not.
It's
So
not.
if we rezone 30 acres and it's commercial special, that's taxed at a much higher rate. Okay, there's 4 sources of revenue. Planning board fees, building permit fees, tangible taxes on the solar, and the commercial tax rate on the land that's converted from RFR8 into commercial special. That's the 4 sources of revenue. You don't pay the same as those folks.
No, what's the commercial tax rate on the land?
45,000 an
45,000
acre, and RFR 80, or when you're doing farm forest and open
2668.
space, it's like 2668?
2068. It's what everyone else pays.
The mill rate is different on
It's
commercial
different on
and
commercial,
residential?
yes,
Correct.
yes.
Oh,
So you
Well,
don't-
the
so you don't-
assessed, it's
The
assessed at a higher.
It says at a
Assessed
at
at
a
a
assessment.
higher.
At a commercial.
Gotcha, okay. The tax rate's the same, the mill rate is the same.
Yeah, it's,
Yes.
Mill rate is the same, but the amount is enormously different, both on manufacturing and on commercial, RFR 80 and R1. They
Okay.
all change. I wanted to say, I did appreciate one of your comments. I think on the deforestation, because in all fairness, and I'll say it out front, is that it's a red herring. It will never be done. It will either stay as farm, or it'll be houses, or it'll be buildings or something, but it will never be reforested. However, if they're going to do a reforested plan and no one knows what the reforesting amount should be.
Folks,
Because no one has
let's
ever done
listen
it.
to one person.
Because no one has ever done it on a solar area, because they haven't decommissioned them yet. That there should start with a number that the planning board decides reasonable, but perhaps even if they decide something is reasonable and you still feel it's low, there could also be an ordinance, a codicil to it that says, and we will relook at this every 5 years to see if it goes up, so that we can establish it at one rate, and every 5 years look at it again, and have our engineer look at it again, and that plan may go up in cost. Not only with putting in as Sharon wanted, all of it at one time, that then we get the interest, but we should look at it again in 5 years, because it's not been done. The decommissioning has never really been done, nor has deforestation. So perhaps both of them could be looked at again in 5 years to say, we need to reassess. And I think that's a possibility too.
Anything that'll
Oh,
reduce
I was
liability
wondering about
on
that.
the resident, I think is a good idea.
Thanks, John. Thanks, appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Clifford Hale from 211 Chase Hill. First of all, thanks for having this workshop. I think this is valuable for everybody to get up here and voice their concerns and also hear your point of views and things like that. One of the things I think is really interesting and important we should be focusing on is the number that Sharon came up with. And even if it does need to be a tweak, generating that greater percentage of the town's electrical needs should be a highlight and should be brought to, well, certainly. And that's exactly what I'm getting to here, right? Is nobody knows, very few of us know these numbers and how much we're actually generating. What all of this effort and this conflict has actually generated. And then the next question is, so what does that mean to the town and the residents? How can we use that number, that percentage, to leverage the state, to leverage other sources of revenue that will help us in the future not have to go through this whole process again? Because as I look at this, with the numbers that Sylvia put together about the school budgets, it's clear that there is a constant increase in the school budget. Okay, so that's not a problem that is ever going to go away. Even if we wanted to fill up the entire town with solar farms, at some point, we're not going to meet the needs of the school budget. Okay, so one of the questions I have when we start talking about these budget needs, or what other things are we doing? Okay, trying to examine other commercial activities. You know, it's a good one, but clearly by these maps, there's not a lot of area here that we can even use for that. And it's pretty clear that the residents are nicely picky about the commercial activities that they're willing to allow. And I understand that. I moved to this town because it's not a big residential area. So I just wonder, like, what sort of activities does the town take to look for federal assistance, state assistance, grant opportunities? I mean, if I ask this because I've actually got some experience pursuing research grants and federal grant funds and things like that. I see that there are a lot of opportunities, federal opportunities out there for educational funding. You can package it, demonstrate your need. Is there anybody that actually, for the town, is looking at things like this? When we start to look at the state level, we should be throwing this 98% number right back in the governor's face and saying if you're making this mandate, that these towns start to meet this renewable energy mandate, well, here we are. We've made 100%, or nearly 100% of our energy resources. What are you going to do for us now that we've helped you with this mandate? Because it looks good for her. It looks good for the state government as well. So, when we, there's plenty of things that I might like to complain about that have already happened. But I think I'd like to just talk, my point is, how can we move ahead with this? I'd like to hear that people don't want to rezone. I think that's a really good idea, especially considering my current situation on Chase Hill Road. But really, I think the effort needs to be put in. I don't know if we need to have an economic development board or something like that, that's Sharon. Another one, or if there's an existing one. I mean, there's a lot of plenty of smart people in this town. There's a lot of, we cannot be the first town in history that's ever had budget issues. We can research some of those things and try to figure out how do we move forward, excuse me, in a productive way so that in 5 years we're not saying, okay, well now we're forced to change our minds and rezone some of these residential areas because we're not meeting our school budget again. So I'm not really sure how to work forward. I would offer that if there is any interest in pursuing some grant opportunities, I wouldn't mind. I could help with that to whatever level anyone was interested.
Hey, Cliff, I just want to bring to your attention, we do have a school committee that is in charge with that portion of the budget. So we attend as a council a lot of their budget meetings. We try and beg them to lower their budgets and to no avail. I pleaded with them. So in my opinion, not only do we have to worry about revenue, but the bigger picture, in my opinion, is trying to control the expense, which is charitable. So we need more people at the meetings, at the budget meetings, to complain about this budget and to have them reduce it, because we have 3 out of 4 of our members that just rubber stamp it, and it's very, very frustrating. And that's really the crux of the issue at hand. And again, we can only, as residents, vote on the charitable budget as a group, but they control that budget, and it's been a rubber stamp for as long as I've been here, 10 years. So.
You know, I think that probably nobody is more of a pariah of terror than me, and I graduated, and I was, Sylvia was here behind me. But just as an example, very constructive criticism, you know, we used to have an omnibus meeting that we could talk about anything that we thought was necessary or we should discuss, and they did away with that, and all they do talk about is the budget. Just for an example, from a practical point of view, the Rhode Island General Assembly, which Article 12, Section 1, directs the General Assembly to promote education, strengthen the state constitution. It's not even implied. But the state legislature, the General Assembly, meets generally from January to June of each year. And it would seem logical, more than logical, that if you have an omnibus meeting in January, you would have a discussion of any legislation that's coming up, because the legislature starts in January. And then there's a point like in March where you basically have to have unanimous consent to introduce any legislation. And it's very short-sighted for the school committee to only have an omnibus meeting discussing the budget, which people need to remember, you can only vote or control the bottom line of the school budget. The school committee has the ultimate power to move line items around, which they do. So why would you waste your time in January talking about the school budget at an omnibus meeting? Because all the elected bodies, the 3 town councils and the school committee, are bound by the open meetings law to host their meetings, and you have to get everybody together. So if all the so-called stakeholders in Charter that elected officials, you got 15 town council members, 5 from each town, and then you have, now it's 12 members of the Charter School Committee, 4 from each town. To really make it work and really to expect all these people to schedule their appearance at an omnibus meeting, you should do something other than talk about the budget, which is going to change. And the school committee ultimately controls the line items, and the only thing the voters actually do is vote on the bottom line. So I think the whole thing is short-sighted. I hold the school committee directly responsible for it, because they could be more open for the local officials in the 3 towns as well as the school committee to talk about their concerns. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you.
Oh, Mr. Hill, before you leave, I just wanted to note that the total annual tax for the solar that we do have, plus there's one pending, it's a by right on Frontier Road. So if you included that, because it's a by right, and all the others, total annual tax is approximately, and it's for the next 30 years, 600, and of course it would increase if the tax increases. But right now it would be $617,648, and that would be an annual tax. The building permit fees is approximately $766,117. Those are two numbers that will help greatly. Thank you.
Yes,
And I was going to say that, again, the town has an economic development board.
Commissioner.
Commission.
Commission,
It's in that.
it's inactive because we don't have enough people volunteering to be on that.
We have one person applied so far.
But we
Maybe
need
Mr.
5.
Hale,
So you're welcome to apply, just go see her.
that'd be good.
It is actually a difficulty trying to get anyone who wants to do economic development, because the town really doesn't want to do much economic development, so it's understandable. But Senator Morgan and I were on the Economic Development Commission at the same time, and that was 14 years ago. And trust me, they really haven't had money since then. The school does look for educational grants for health things, and they're already really doing that. But Sharon and I have for the last 10 years, Sharon has for the last year since she's been here, we are at every budget meeting, and we have gone through that budget line by line, unlike the rest of the council. And we have made over $1 million line by line. We have made
Yes.
suggestions over $1 million each year on what they can cut, and they do not. So we have worked extensively on this budget. We could use all the help we can get at those budget meetings, and they are consistent. They are almost all January, sometimes 2 a week. It's really good joy.
There are, I mean, aside from educational grants too, there are other opportunities
Yes.
out there for
I
small
think-
town. I mean, this is, we need to play up the
We do
benef-
get a lot of
the
grants.
benefits that this town has, right?
We
It's
do.
Rural, we want to preserve
Right.
rural towns like this.
I think
and-
those are great ideas.
and I think
And
it's-
if you can talk to Mr. McGarry, if you can offer some help on that, I think it's great.
We even got the second course road done by grant at Fairview Avenue, completely grant, thanks to Mr. Gary and his staff.
I didn't mean to imply that
No.
nobody was doing anything.
No,
I knew
what I
wasn't
wanted
aware
to
of
know
it.
is it's great, the
Everyone
grants
who
are
wants
great.
to have it, that's great.
Thank you.
Joe?
Carol? Carol, come on.
Be my guest, Carol.
Carolyn Light, 43 Forest Glen Drive, I'm also a member of the planning board. I gotta get this off my chest. I maybe came from a different world, but I see these 5 people as a team, and it pinches me every time somebody refers to, I did this and I did that, and regardless of what town council did what a year ago, you were a team when you did it. Today, going through the line items, I think you're a team. So I don't think it's appropriate to point fingers at people by not saying their name. And for future reference, I think I would like people to think about that, because I would never sit with the planning board and assume that I was not a member of that team, and whether I was in that room or outside of that room, everything I say reflects on the people that I'm on the team with. Given that, you had asked who's going to get the interest on that forestation money. Question back to you is, the council approved $264,000 for decommissioning on a project. Who's getting the interest on that?
It has to sit in the account and grow over time.
But who gets the interest?
The person that put the money up,
Okay, and my second question would be,
otherwise it wouldn't grow.
The
The money
developer-
wouldn't grow in
I
time.
get it, I know it, I totally get putting money in the bank and having it grow, or investing in its stocks, blah, blah, blah. That's great. Here's my other question. Did the town take into account the town's cost to administer that bond from the day it was approved till the day it's finished? How much is it going to cost the town to manage that decommissioning effort over the 30 years? And I'm pretty sure that the number would be somewhere around $100,000. We can figure that out later, but that calculation was it included in that decommissioning money? And I know the interest is going to go to the person who puts up the bond if they keep their promise. But we, as a town council planning board, zoning board, are still going to hold the obligation of administering that, even if the trees are never planted, even if the decommissioning is never done. It costs the town money. So hopefully, that's something that will be taken into consideration, because I don't think when a developer comes forward, and, for instance, this project that we're talking about, says, here's, our idea is $115,000, and we could very easily say, sure, you guys got it, you know what you're talking about, so we're gonna go for it. But in that $115,000, which is a short amount, they're not saying, hey, Hopkinton, you guys are gonna have to recoup some costs somewhere because it's gonna cost your planner, your consultants, your engineers. They're not talking about any of that stuff. I think it's food for thought.
Yeah, I just had I'll let you finish, but I'm just curious on what you're thinking of the administrative costs. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's a cost.
So just so you know, so when the bond's put up, it goes to finance. Brian puts it in an interest-bearing account,
Right.
and it sits there and grows over time.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of monitoring. We don't touch it. It's restricted.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure. There's not a lot of administrative cost for towns to bear at all, and the money grows over time to hopefully have enough money to decommission or to reforest whatever we need in 25 years. That's the thought. But there's not a lot of administrative tasks or duties that are assigned to watch that money in an account. It sits there and grows over time.
My
And
financial advisor would beg to differ.
Oh, yeah.
I hate to say I, but since you don't like that, but with Brushy Brook, I specifically asked for the financial assistance for the finance department and what it would cost. Brian also did answer that for me for Brushy Brook, and he said that would be about $100 a year, because there are not high costs once the bond goes in, exactly as Frank says.
$100?
Yes. It was a minor amount, but it was $100 a year. That would be a fee for them to just keep that moving and keep it rolling, because there really is, as Frank said, almost nothing to do with it. But I did ask that specific question because it's a good one. And I also think that we need to be careful of how we have to maintain whatever we allow a developer to do. So
Okay.
I appreciate the question. It was a good one.
Okay, and it's a completely different game when you talk about forestation. It's an administrative issue at the end of the
That is-
life cycle, and it's an expensive one, something that'll have to be answered at a later date.
That's very true.
Okay.
Very different from the financing of the bond. Very different.
My last comment would be that I think our community has been extremely generous to all of the developers, all of these people that are building this project, plugging in, doing their green energy thing. We have been too generous because other communities, other knowledgeable communities, don't talk about a fair cost for forestation or decommissioning. It's not a fair cost. It's here's the cost, and you're going to give us this money today, and we're going to take a portion of your money because we have to administer this eventually, and we'll talk 30 years from now. In 30 years from now, your costs are going to be higher. The cost of the decommissioning could be sideways, down, up, whatever. But being fair, asking them for a fair amount of cash escrow is not fair to the community. Because like we said, I don't want my granddaughter or my daughter trying to figure out how to fix this. It's wrong. We cannot create a problem for the future generation that they didn't ask for. And for all intents and purposes, if we're going to say, okay, Mr. Maxon Hill, we'll take your $115,000. Why don't we roll it up to $215,000? What are they going to do? Are they going to put the trees back? Are they going to repair everything they've done, they're gonna give you the money, they have to give you the money. Under the terms of the relationship they have with our community, they should have been putting up that cash money for decommissioning and forestation months ago. So let's be fair and say, we gotta stop doing things backwards, and we have to stop appreciating what the future value of this mistake is gonna be, and given the opportunity to fix it today with any projects that are in the pipeline that can be maneuvered, anything that's coming forward that needs that special attention, we should do it. The town council already agreed that rezoning property, residential land, for solar is going to be met with a 3% or 3-acre limitation. That's fair. Why can't we be fair about the rest of it? The costs are going to be borne by us. And I don't want to change my retirement because my children have to figure out what went wrong in 2019.
I just wanted to say that on the Maxon Hill project, the decommissioning cost was $243,000, and they have, I think that's already here. We have that.
Okay, even if it was 300,000 flat, I would say it's still.
I understand looking at it again and seeing if it has to raise. I would quite agree with you, but indeed they have already put that money in
Yeah,
from that.
yeah.
But I know the planning board is still discussing the deforestation.
At their leisure.
I just wanted to do that.
Yeah, we're all on board, and I think everybody came here with really good intentions, because it's not like the town council meeting that happened last week. We're all being patient, we're all being kind to each other, let's continue to do that, but let's learn from the projects that have been approved by right, or by rezoning, or any, we can learn from it. And my comment on any projects that were approved before the old depot project came on board is that nobody knew what was going on, and nobody really paid attention to what was going on. So while the abutters might have gotten notification, it's something that isn't really a big deal until another 60 acres comes along, and all of a sudden that's going to be solar panels. So the noise is here now because people didn't know how serious it was then. And it's just who we are, and I don't believe my neighbors are opposed to any kind of economic development, commercial development. We would all like to see some solutions that won't bring us here. So when you say nobody wants this and nobody wants that, I don't think that's true. If we can help stabilize our finances with some kind of a logical development opportunity, we'd be on board with it. Maybe it'll be a 4-to-1 vote, I don't know, but bring it on. And we do need an economic development commission. We're all guilty of not participating in these things. And I know that you don't want to hear about the school budget, but we have a role to play as taxpayers when these budgets are being voted on, or when these budgets are being developed. We need to step up and come to the meetings and support the town council, because the school committee is a problem. They will not hear you. We have to do the same thing we do with solar projects with the school budget. And until that happens, we're going to be singing the same song.
Couldn't have said it any better myself.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Jessica. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
You can go first if you want.
Joe,
would you mind?
No,
No, ma'am. I missed you. Go ahead. Please, let him go, please.
Maybe you could share. I'm not going to leave with glass shoes. No. Yes, yes, yes. I don't know, she did a good on it.
Yeah, it's all yours.
I think I'm picking with the loop.
No, it's surgery.
Thank you.
Hi, Rosemary Kingsbury, River Lane. I have a lot of questions. Also, I have a lot of opinions. The first opinion I'm going to express is
of this. I believe in clean energy. I have been carrying my own tote bag since the 60s. Okay? I am that person that doesn't use plastic bags, has the glass reusable bottles, has the Tupperware that's going to be around forever because I still have avocado green and almond. All right? So I'm dated. I'm that environmental person. I am not in the bother of some of these solar panels directly, the solar utilities, but I am greatly affected by them because they are all around me. What else is also all around me are coyotes, bobcats, foxes, all manner of things. One kitten that I trapped last year, I do TNRM, in the valley. I help control our feral cat population here in the town of Hopkinton, particularly in the Tom Park area. $1,400 in 6 months to get this cat, to keep her alive. Vet said I couldn't do it, I did it. Yeah. 2 seconds in the middle of the day, coyote, gone. That was the first one. 2 weeks later, another one. Now I have 3 cats that used to enjoy being outside in my wooded area, in the daytime when we say, no longer safe. Along with the other animals that I'm seeing. And the fact that now we have to help supplement feed the deer or they're going to die of starvation because there's not enough food for them because we just wiped out hundreds and hundreds of acres of where they lived and the food that they ate. And we all know that starvation is a very painful way to go. Well now, I'm hoping I get possums because I have every day probably about 20 deer in my backyard. And they all came down the hill. I never expected to see a bobcat. I've seen 2. Because they have no place to go. We have pushed them out. We have done this irresponsibly, at the wrong time of year. I also take offense to the fact that there is no buffer at the top of Maxon Hill Road. I have not traveled to the other facilities, although I did see a picture of the other one. And it's a laugh what they did. And I don't understand why this town council didn't step in and say, this is not what we expected. A plant and 2 bushes. Why is there no buffer between my neighbor's house and the strip of the forest that they did? Because if I did that, somebody would be at my doorstep going, you have crossed the buffer, you are too close. And if you're putting in an industrial project like that, a utility like that, why is the buffer greater than what it is? Furthermore, why weren't you looking out for me and my neighbors when we're going to work and now I'm stuck there for 10 minutes while they're backing their trucks in on Maxon Hill Road to get these giant trucks into that tiny little spot. Now I'm late for work and I can't back up because I've got 4 cars behind me. Now I'm late for work. I'm coming down Maxon Hill Road and I have to stop. I have to find a neighbor's driveway to pull in because there's a logging truck coming up and he's not going to stop for me. There is no flat road on either side of Maxon Hill. It is a gully. It is a ditch. Do you think they're going to pay for my car if it goes in that ditch because they throw me off the road? Hell no. We have done this wrong. I feel that the town has looked after the developers' rights and the developers' needs more than the neighbors and not just the people that are butting up against it. You should have gone right down that valley and let us know. And our communication is just atrocious. I mean, honestly, if you are a parent in this town, you are working 40 hours a week, you are raising children, you're doing everything you do not have time to go here to this website to look at what the agenda is going to be every single Monday. And if there's something very important, we need to get it out and not through the Westerly Sun. I don't subscribe to the Westerly Sun. But there's a lot of other things that I do subscribe to. I don't answer the phone most of the time because I have so many people telling me they're from Blue Cross and IRS and every other single place. Like every 70 minutes right now, I'm calling myself because they do phone nesting. Unfortunately, because I didn't answer my phone, my stepfather had fallen down outside, was taken to the emergency room, and Lifeline was trying to call me to tell me this, but I didn't recognize the number, thought it was a robocall, so why am I going to answer a call from you? right? Something major. The post office works great. I work for an accounting firm. The only safe way for us to deliver data now is to mail it to the post office, to deliver it ourselves, or a fax machine the old-fashioned way. So we're back to that. I think we should go back to that. Postcards. Send postcards out. Do something. Here's what I did when I was the president-elect. Yeah, that. If you're a direct abutter.
Right.
Right. But what about everything else?
Increase it.
How about, let's see. There's two things that I did when I was faced with getting a mass amount of information out to a lot of people over all of New England because they couldn't attend meetings. I went virtual, and this was a dozen years ago. I also sent out newsletters. I mailed newsletters. My attendance at meetings was phenomenal. My input to questions that I asked was immensely and greatly improved because I mailed them something. I didn't leave it up to them on a very important matter to come to my website to look at what we were doing. It was important. I needed them to know. I told them. If they didn't read the newsletter, that was their business. But in everything that we have available to us, because these town meetings, I mean, you can go online after the fact and see them, right? Why aren't they on? Why don't we have input virtually for people? Why isn't somebody sitting right there? I mean, we see this all of the time. I attend webinars all the time. It's the only way I'm going to get my CPEs in every year is to do it on webinars. And what do? We have questions, we type them in. There's somebody monitoring them to ask the questions of the person conducting the webinar. Why aren't we having our meetings virtually? Lastly, I love Cherokee. It's an awesome school. I support Cherokee. I support what they're doing. I support how they're doing it. I support the quality of education that our children are getting. I graduated from there. My husband graduated from there. My children graduated from there. And lastly, her daughter, who now works there, and is going to become a teacher there. And I'm proud of this. Do we have problems in the school system? Hell yeah. Who doesn't? I think our problems are not with the education of our children. I think our problems have everything to do with the union, the number of days our teachers work, the pay that they get for the days that they work, all of the other benefits that they get. They are employees. Problems with the employer, which is a union, which is difficult. And we're not going to be able to change that. Solar is not going to change that. I'm in Hopkinton because I like the character of Hopkinton. I'm in Hopkinton because I love the ruralness, the quietness, which has disappeared now because there's no buffer. I hear the highway now, with my windows closed, with everything tied up. I hear the highway. And if I can hear the highway and I can hear Route 3, guess what? I'm being polluted by all those cars. So I'm being polluted, but we're benefiting with solar. And I didn't know anything about that until they started clearing those trees. So partly shame on me for not knowing what's going on in my town, but partly shame on you for only notifying the abutters of the property, and for not saying this is big and this is important, we need our town to know about it, and getting the word out. I know that you're smart enough to get the word out. I get no word from the town of Hopkinton. I am on code red. I don't get calls. I have verified that my number is on there. I still don't get calls. So I don't know what's up with that. I get my tax bill. If you can get me my tax bill, you can get me information about what's going on in this town. And you can keep me informed, because that is part of your job. It's my responsibility and your responsibility. My responsibility to know, but not only my responsibility. I'm going to start working 70 hours a week pretty soon in January once tax season hits. I can't be here. I can't volunteer to be on anything. I am a perennial volunteer. I am internationally certified in what I do. But I can't be here January through April, so I can't help you. I can't go to your website to find out what's going on. So, can't volunteer. Would like to. Got something going on this summer? Glad to help you. Who is responsible for the solar panels once their life is gone? Is that developer just walking away from that? Who's responsible for removing them?
It's once a developer moves into the, selling his project to the builder, the builder is responsible for maintaining it to the end.
And at the end.
And-
Well,
At
actually,
the end.
excuse me, what ends up happening in the end, once it's completed, is a national company, a huge company, and all they do are manage these projects. And they buy it up, and they buy them up all over the
But is
country.
it pre-bought? Do we have any guarantee that it's going to be bought?
I'm just telling you, that's the way these things go.
That's not what I have read. I have read, other things. And I have even gone to sources in the state with regard to solar. What happens to these solar panels at the end, and whose responsibility is it? And how bad is it? How good is it? What are they going to do? The big thing is right now we have no national standards. Yes, they're a source of recycling, but there's also some terrible minerals in there. Yes, they can end up in our landfills and our water sources. And no, we don't have any policies on them yet. Yes, it is expensive to do, and basically there's just nothing in place right now. And I was reading that the two companies that are trying to get into the United States are actually in Europe, and there's no real big companies here in the United States doing anything with recycling things. So if there's a company that's doing this, are we just relying on the fact that that company is going to be here in 20 to 30 years and that they will come in and do it? Or are we going to be stuck, or are our children going to be stuck with toxic waste dumps and the cleanup that's entailed? So the person who owns these solar panels is just going to walk away. Is that really
We
what's
have a
written into the contract?
decommissioning process.
Sorry?
We have a decommissioning process.
Yes.
It's in the approved plans.
Right.
Okay, we set a bond for the decommissioning, that money grows over time, so in 25 years, hopefully
So
there's enough.
we have to, hopefully
Not the
we
town.
have enough money.
Right. We
To do
we
this.
put our best foot forward to put enough money initially up
Why
front.
isn't the owner in charge of decommissioning this? Why?
Well, they
If
would
I
be.
were in the
They would be in the
house,
end.
he
We're just
is.
collecting the money so that it grows over time, so we'd have enough to do it, but they're responsible.
I
for
keep
decommissioning.
hearing we have enough to do it. We have the money. We're collecting the money, so
But we're
we
not the
have
ones
enough to do
decommissioning,
it.
we're holding the money for the decommissioning.
And you're holding them responsible.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. My next question is, when the builders are coming in, and I have come into, I've experienced with this with the town, and they violate something, they do wrong. They're supposed to leave 50 feet, I'm just throwing numbers at you, you're supposed to leave 50 feet, they only leave 10. Who's there telling them, you've overstepped? Who's there making them do what they're supposed to do? Because I have run into this before with the town, and not one person in the town came to my rescue. Not one. I spent $20,000 of my own money in a year in court to get that person to do what he was supposed to do by town ordinances.
We have a planning department, a planner, that generally monitors the larger projects. Okay, they'll go out and visit weekly. We have what in our, Sylvia read our, usually our condition of approval is what, are monitoring it weekly or monthly through our on-call engineering firm, so we do have a process in place to do
So
that.
in my area, it seems to have had absolutely positively no effect at all. It's as if the person doing the work there is paying lip service to whoever is showing up, turning around, flipping his finger and doing what he wants. That's what I see.
or a commercial
This is a commercial project in a residential area. Maxon Hill.
Which one?
It's Maxon Hill. For heaven's sakes, it's Maxon Hill. I'm sorry, at 7 in the morning, I should not be hearing them working.
Let me point out that
I
the
should-
landscaping, that you talked about the buffer. When these projects happen and you look out the window and you can look and you can see into Connecticut, it used to be all trees, okay? When they finish with the project, when the panel's up and they finish with the project, then they do the
Like on
landscape.
216.
Then they do the, no,
Like on
216.
216.
I don't,
I'm sorry,
I'm-
somebody
216 is
posted a picture of 216 and I
216
voted
is
for that
completely
because
different.
it was supposed to be.
That's completely different.
Yeah, and
It's not finished.
All right, wait, I'm
Hold
not
on,
gonna
hold on.
answer it.
Sylvia wants to address your concerns.
I'm not going to answer any more questions because it seems that no matter what we say, you don't believe us. So I'll just let you
Because what I
say what you
see-
need to say.
What I see happening, I'm there every single day. I'm driving up that road every single day. I'm coming back on that road every single day. I'm seeing what happens on a daily basis. And I'm not seeing any change. I am hearing, yes, we are complaining. I am hearing, yes, he showed up. And I am seeing that there is no change. None at all. I don't have faith in this builder at all, that he's going to do anything to create a buffer to hide this from anyone. Not at all. With his history, none. And with the history of projects that I've seen in this town, I just don't have any faith that it's going to be done.
You don't like Gray Lane
Sorry?
or Exit 2, B2B Gateway?
I don't know what
Gray
gateway is.
Lane is,
I'm not familiar with gateways.
Can you speak to the topic of what she's discussing?
well, she doesn't seem to like any project we've
Well,
done.
let me just try to address her concern.
I'm trying to address the projects that I am seeing.
Right,
The ones that I
which is
see
a job site right now. It's a
It's
job
a,
site.
it's a job site that's extremely disruptive to all of the residents around.
And DEM has come in and given us a full letter and to say it is all being done exactly as they have said. And
Well,
it is exactly as the planning board has said. It is being done correctly. You don't want to believe it, you don't want to think that, but it is the truth.
And
Under
my
road,
truth,
we're
I'm
gonna
sorry,
go on a plan.
my truth is that I hear them working when they should not be working.
All right, so.
My truth is, I see them doing things that they should not be doing. My truth is that I'm reporting this. My truth is that I don't see any change.
So let me just address that. So if you hear someone starting at 7, okay, before 7, or, let me just make sure I understand.
You know, I go out to feed the animals between 6:15 and 6:45. And I
Because they're not supposed to
usually-
start
They are supposed to
until
start,
8 o'clock.
but they
But
can arrive.
Can I answer the question? So they can go there prior to 8 o'clock. They can't start the heavy machinery until after 8 o'clock. The noise ordinance is 7 to 11, so that's completely separate. But if you hear anything prior to 8 o'clock, call the police department.
I have.
Okay.
I
They'll file a report.
I file a report.
Okay.
I take videos. You know, one
And
time
then
when that logging
ultimately-
truck came out, I stood my ground. I got out of my car, I put it in park, I folded my arms, and I said, no, you're going to move, not me.
And so, once the police report is filed, then ultimately, I guess it gets to Bill and/or the zoning office, and they'll investigate it and find out if they were doing something they weren't supposed to do. So, I'm not sure, again, if you filed reports, I'd have to research that and find out what's happened, so I'd be willing to do that.
I just want them to do it where they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And they're not. I hear them, I see them, I run into them on a daily basis. And it's just not right. We have to do something here. They could have come at that in an entirely different way. Coming up and down Maxon Hill Road, I don't know why they're not using Frontier Road. Frontier Road is made for those trucks, not Maxon Hill Road. Frontier Road's a better way for them to go, not Maxon Hill Road. But yet consistently they take Maxon Hill Road. Yeah. I mean, what is the problem? Why can't they? Why can't they take Frontier? Why can't you guys go out there and say, look, we're being pushed at, a lot of things are being filed, you're an annoyance, it's a small road, use Frontier.
What happened to the road they were building?
Yeah, what happened to that? Why didn't they even wait for that?
The road they were building is going to have an access point from Route 3. It's a farm road that used to go to a farmhouse.
Yeah, by the time that's done, it's probably, they're gonna be done.
I was up there, I've got pictures on my phone, there's aggregate 2 to 4 inch stone that's been put on there. They have to put some bales on the side and some sediment controls. We were told, and I know Jim and Bill were also at Mike Preet's office, the engineer on site, by December 5th, which is Wednesday, that access point from Maxon Hill is supposed to be closed, and Route 3 access point is to be used exclusively. That's
Why
what.
didn't they grant access for Maxon Hill?
Well, again,
Why
I'll
didn't
answer
they
that.
do that?
I'll answer that. It wasn't a condition of the approval, So, but they basically said, we'll spend the money to access that point to the project from Route 3. So they're spending money they don't really have to spend to make that an access point. And so we're trying to work with them to make sure that happens. And we've had DEM out there, and they basically said that if they agreed with that road, they approved it very quickly. And normally, it's not a very quick process with wetlands, and they approved it very quickly. So the logging...
The DEM allowed them to alter a wetland.
No, they have to get a wetland permit. And so DEM, the person, we were there on site, face to face with him. He walked the road with me, Bill, and Jim, and we basically said, that road is, if you do this, this, and this, we'll approve it and fast track it so that we can get the road used, the access point from Route 3 used instead of Maxon Hill. So it's something that's being worked on. It's been being worked on. They only worked 3 days last week for Thanksgiving week, but they promised us by 12/5 that access point from Route 3 will be used and not Maxon Hill. And no more logging trucks either. Thompson's all done with that as of a week or so ago. So they are working on it, and we understand. We've heard it loud and clear. And Jim Lanfair and Andrew Bill has been there every week, finding out what's happening, getting updates face to face every Friday. So.
Yeah, but have you been getting updates from the residents? Or just from the person who's been...
Well, the developer, because that's the one that's got the answers, right? If we want them to make changes, right?
I don't think the builder's going to give, I honestly feel the builder's just going to give them lip service.
Well, I've driven the road and I've walked it.
Right, but I kind of live on it.
No, I know. No, I'm talking about
Way more information about
I'm not
what's
talking
going on.
about Maxon Hill, I'm talking about the access point.
Okay, yeah.
Maxon Hill, I'm not talking about Maxon, I'm talking about the farmhouse. I've walked it and I've driven it and I've got pictures. They're working on it. And they told us that by December 5th, they're going to have that access point open and no longer use Maxon. That's what we've been told. And we're correctly just stating that. And I believe that they'll do that.
Didn't they say 2 weeks ago that it was?
Yeah.
And they said by December 30th on that Wednesday, we're not going to see that on the road.
Let's have one person talk. I visited the site, Bill and Jim. Whatever they tell us is what we convey, okay?
Right, but that didn't happen.
No, I know.
Because now,
Again,
2 weeks later, you're saying this
right.
Wednesday.
But why can't we enforce this on them? If they say they're going to do something, if we require them to do something and they don't do it, what recourse does the town have against, I don't care if it's a commercial builder or a residential builder or me building another house? What authority do you have to say you can't do this and this is what we're going to do because you violated it?
Again, if they follow all the permitting process correctly, okay, and they've done what they needed to do. Again, I've stated that the Maxon Hill access point was not a condition of approval.
That's not my question. My question is,
We can't stop it.
if they violate something, if they violate an ordinance, they violate part of their building plan, they violate anything that's in writing, what recourse do we have to force them to do what they say they're going to do?
We can tell them to stop, I guess, but we need information that proves that they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And we believe, according to the planner's office, that they've done everything permitting-wise in DEM that they're supposed to. And so this access point, that's why it's so important that we try and work with them so that they don't use Maxon Hill and they use the Route 3 access point. So
I hope that everybody here takes Maxon Hill as a lesson in what needs to be done next time we put commercial and residential area. And the amount of respect and consideration that needs to go towards the residents living there, because that weighs more than the person that's building. The people who are there and the residents who are there should be respected more and given more respect and latitude than the builders are. I feel that it's just lopsided, that it's been the other way, that we've been stepped on, that we've been ignored, and that everything is being done for the builder. And I mean, honestly, I just don't feel as though we've been informed and taken into consideration, and I have nothing else to say.
Boy, I wish I went before you. Joe Moreau, Old Depot Road. I just want to clarify something because I was a little confused. Myself and Luther and a couple of other people were at every budgeting workshop that we had. And the town council took the time to go through line by line, every budget item. And that was part of the process, was line by line to look at that budget. The other thing I want to mention is that the planning board works very hard to do the right thing. Again, quite a few of us in this room have attended every planning board meeting. Unfortunately, quite often, it's overruled on what their decision is. To clarify something about the Stubbtown Road dump, I reviewed that in the beginning, back in September 2018, and from the manufacturer, where that building is, where there is three-phase power, it's 0.9 of a mile to Stubbtown Road dump. So it is less than a mile. Ian Walsh from Newport Renewables said three-phase power is not an issue. I appreciate the fact that Bill and Jim have done to continue with that process. I've heard several times tonight, and I agree 100% of the communication or the lack of communication, trying to get the message out to residents. I'm not going to talk about an issue I had on Friday, but most people do not look at the bulletin board out here or go to the police department for issues with communication. As you know, I've mentioned several times, and it is getting better. It started with the phone system. I've mentioned about the website and what additional information we can put on the website. And I know Lisa and Chris have been working on that, but the communication is still an issue in my opinion. I've been to Maxon Hill 3 or 4 times a week. I saw Barbara there one day last week. I went out with Carol DeRozier on a week ago Thursday and handed out 70 flyers to notify residents of the meeting for Chase Hill Road. I said I'd like to stop at Maxon Hill and take a look. And when I went by there, I was amazed to see this road going in, a separate road. There's the Reynolds house, there's a stone wall and whatever the buffer is, and there's all crushed stone. As I'm turning around in that road, it's very difficult to make a turn there. Carol DeRozier looked at me and said, "Joe, you better get the hell out of here. This guy's coming right after us. A piece of equipment, and he's barreling down on me to make a point."
Oh, there,
And I did. I got out of there. All the equipment is parked up there. I don't think there was one piece of equipment that is parked down by Main Street. Even that huge rock truck is now parked up by the residents. What I found out about that crushed stone is that's the interconnector. They have that huge piece of property, and they have to put the interconnector right at the property line. And the point about not seeing it, go to 216 and look at Bradford, and you see all the telephone poles. I mean, you definitely see that. And they put some shrubs up. Yeah, they put shrubs up. That is an issue, and I don't know how or what we could do to change the location of that interconnector. The other thing is there's a piece of property that was recently purchased by a New Jersey developer off of Palmer Circle, and purchased that, it's stone manufacturing, and there was some conversation about medical building, assisted living, and I agree with that. I think that's something we need. It provides jobs for the residents. The issue is getting to that property at this point. But the other point I heard was a little bit of solar is going to go in there. Well, a little bit of solar, in my mind, might be on my roof. That property was changed many years ago from RFR 80 to limited commercial for condos and a golf course. And I think they want to put a small conference center there. I can see it now. I can see it now where we're going to be standing here opposing this particular developer for that project. I told you about Thursday when I saw the interconnector road. Myself and Carol went out on Friday. We handed out 70 more flyers. Emily and Chip went out on Saturday, and I think they did over 75. They also posted signs in some of the local businesses. We had the meeting on Monday for Chase Hill Road, and it was amazing the number of people that I spoke to that had no idea about the meeting. They said, whoever put those flyers on our mailbox, that's how we found out about the meeting. So it gets back to the communication part of it. The other thing, we're talking about residents having as much time as possible. I can recall at the Old Depot Road project, my wife and I were sitting in the front row, and we had a couple of hearings, and one of the council members made a motion to close the hearing, and kind of looked over at Tom Buck, and sitting in the front row, I could hear this, and the council member said, Tom, aren't you going to make a motion to close the hearing? Tom said, no. The council member said, why not? Tom said, look at the residents that are here. We need to speak to these residents. We need to listen to these residents. The point is, there were 70 people that I counted that showed up last Monday. I think Sylvia had commented. She pulled into the parking lot and was surprised at the elementary school to see that many people. And that was just really putting notices on mailboxes to get residents there. I still believe it's an issue with communication. The last thing I want to mention is I presented this, spoke about this August 2018. I gave copies to some members of the planning board about a study that was done talking about decommissioning solar panels. And on a 2 megawatt system, after 20 years, they had a 2.5% inflation. For a 2 megawatt system, it was $99,000 decommissioning cost. So Old Depot Road at that time was a 20 megawatt system. So I figured out the dollars for that. It would be almost $1 million for decommissioning for that project. When I look at the number that I was quoted, of $463,000 just to do reforestation, the point is to protect our town and our residents. The numbers are grossly underestimated for these projects, and I think we need to look at other people like Western Engineering to take a look at this. And Carolyn, I will not tell you where I got that information. Sorry.
I will find out.
Good luck to you. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I have dental tools. Dental tools, I tell you. I know what you
Hi, Jeff Light, 43 Forest Pond Drive. I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to ask Sylvia about the $600 and something thousand and how much of that we've received already. So if you need some time to prepare for that, that would be good utilization.
I have some figures that might be a little slightly different than hers, but as far as, again, there's 4 sources of revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Permit fees from planning board and permit fees from zoning.
One-time fees.
One-time fees, correct.
Yep.
So.
Oh, I did miss them.
Yeah, I have it all added up. so.
Oh,
Great.
And then ultimately, you know, the tangible taxes on the panels and then the commercial tax rate on the land.
After they're appraised.
Correct. Well, no, after they're finished and they come online. So that tangible tax and the commercial taxes when the projects come online.
I thought they had to be appraised at the new commercial rate to be assessed at the higher revenue to the town.
Based on. Yes, when they come online, yeah. So.
Correct.
Okay.
But anyway,
So,
I'll tell you about the permitting fees to date.
Great, thank you.
So I've added up on the top portion of, I don't know if folks have this particular solar list, but altogether we've received $776,657, and that's planning board and or zoning fees, zoning permit fees.
Okay.
776,000. The non-council approved projects were 324,495, and the council approved projects were about 452,000 in revenue for the one-time permitting fees.
So you say $1.3 million in?
No, in total, Jeff, was 776 in total.
In total for the...
On the ones that have been approved and closed out.
Okay,
Okay?
so,
And then revenue on the ones that were approved, the 5 by the council,
mhm,
and the revenue for the ones that were approved, either they were by right commercial and or manufacturing zone, and the farming liability, the total revenue over the 25-year was 12,953,000. That's after, that's for the whole life of the project. That's assuming the tax rate stays the same, you know that.
right, okay. So when the town counts on the budgetary resources due to the approval and operation of the solar projects. Okay.
Yeah, the permitting fees we receive up front.
Right, I understand the
Yeah,
permitting
so it
fees.
obviously helps out.
I'm talking about when it's operational and generating electricity.
Yeah.
The town gets cut.
Yep,
Okay,
yeah.
So-
we tax-
yeah,
tax
great.
it.
Glad we're on the same page. So I don't know, and hopefully you guys can straighten me out. So there's, numbers that come from developers who say that under these conditions, we're going to be able to generate this much electricity. So the numbers they give and propose to the council as revenue figures to come in, what percentage of their numbers has been realized on the existing operational facilities already generating revenue for the project owners now?
Yeah, so the tax assessor gets the projects that come online, and based on the kilowatt hours AC, that's what she bases her assessments on. And that's the generation of the assessed values.
Wonderful. So if they come in, we'll just arbitrarily pull a number of $50,000. Okay, in the first year, the town can expect $50,000 if this program gets approved and becomes operational as applied. So of that $50,000, is it safe to say that each project is realizing the 100% the developer had said that the town was going to get for it to approve the project?
Yeah.
So we're getting every dime we said we were going to get from
Because they're
operational.
based on the energy output of the project.
Right.
And those generally don't change because they have to seek approvals based on the energy project
Mhm.
output, okay?
Right, the reason I bring it up is I've seen research that I've done personally about where some developers in some locations have said numbers based on 24-hour-a-day, 100-fold, percent sun. And obviously that can't be, so it's comforting to know that this town is prepared and
Yeah, I
addressed.
mean, I can certainly share this spreadsheet with you. It kind of spells it all out, project by project. It's
That'd be great.
very insightful, and you can see my numbers, and I got it from finance.
Great.
And the tax assessors.
But to not burden you is another way to get it, just go to the clerk and ask for it? or-
Yeah, I can, make a copy of
It was
it.
part of the report that I had.
Okay.
Okay.
It was included in there.
I believe a co-resident.
We can
of
leave,
my
we can
twelve.
leave a copy for you at town hall.
Okay, thank you very much. The other thing I'd like to bring up is, Barbara, I was a bit surprised by your comment about $100 per year for 25 years. So, I know you're very proud of taking care of the poor and the sick and the needy and the elderly.
Well, I
So why not take the $2,500 from them instead of giving it back to them and use it to help the people that you say you want to help? So $2,500 is $2,500.
I thought it was low, but I said, whatever.
Whatever it is, could be
I'm not a
$10,
finance guy.
could be 50 cents.
I agree.
Great. Thank you for your time. Appreciate
The
it.
other thing is on National Grid. National Grid tells them how much power they will take. From
Right.
that solar array, they agree that this will be a particular megawatt,
Mhm.
because they're going to pull that much. So when they say it's 2.2 megawatts or whatever it is, that is an established rate that the assessor can use.
Okay.
Because it's through National Grid saying, we're not taking any more than this.
Mhm.
That's a whole different application they'd have to do if they go above what National Grid has agreed to take.
Great. That's a great point. It spurs another question, which is, there's been discussion in town meetings, in town council meetings, about that grid reaching a limit that they can absorb. So where are we on the percentage of what they can take? Because if we're sitting here debating future things that are getting approved, that that grid isn't going to be able to absorb the energy unless we're not going to get any revenue, what's the point of talking about those that will never come to fruition?
National Grid has plenty of power available still.
I'd love to hear more about that, because I've heard in more than one meeting about Nat Grid saying they're not committing to taking more power projects on. So what are we going to do as a town to prepare the town from letting people come in, rightfully so, following the law, being good stewards and good neighbors, and they're saying they have all these intentions, And then that grid says, oh, I'm sorry, we're done, we don't have any more capacity to take power, so what are you doing about that?
They can't begin the project until National Grid gives them their potential. What they potentially National Grid will agree to give them. They can't even begin. National Grid is at the beginning and National Grid's at the end. But at the very beginning, they need something from National Grid saying, I will take X number of megawatts from you.
And do we
And
know,
and National Grid has to say, I know how I'm going to get the poles there, I know what it's going to cost to run it, you're going to pay for it. The developer has to pay for it. But National Grid is at the beginning and it's at the end, and they check it all the way through. So National Grid tells them what they can do. They don't just say, well, we're going to do this. National Grid has to agree that they'll do that.
I
Otherwise, it
understand.
won't work.
So does the town council know how much capacity that grid has to draw electricity from projects in Hopkinton?
Yes.
There's got to be a finite number.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever has been approved through National Grid, that is the finite number. But it is not the finite number of what National Grid can hold and still absorb. National Grid can still absorb an enormous amount over here. This is how much we're presenting it with. But National Grid can absorb more.
I'm just concerned because, I mean, the school budget is a real issue, okay? That's the Titanic. And solar is one of a bunch of buckets for throwing at the big problem.
Correct.
So, creating more revenue in a responsible manner is obviously hopefully the goal of every town resident. But, until we address the fare, I mean, we're all just sitting here with Band-Aids and the guy got stabbed and shot 15 times. And so, let me know how I can help.
You can run for
Maybe I should, no, not school. No, but is there a form to apply for the EDC?
Economic development.
Is there a form for that?
Absolutely.
Great, I'm going to fill that out. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
You should have had those forms years ago.
You got any kids, Mr. Light, that might want to volunteer too?
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I do have children.
Right.
And if anybody else would like to join the EDC and have any questions, I'll be happy to help. If anybody needs help, please see me, I'm willing to help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That helped.
Anyone else? Yes, Ed. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Assange.
Pretty sure this is.
Yeah, well,
Is that better?
Yeah.
Denise Marble, 120 Woodville, Altrin Road, Hope Valley. And you've seen me probably at quite a lot of these meetings, and I really want to talk about respect. I applaud Scott's remarks earlier about the idea that the town council has to respect the planning board. The town council also needs to respect the residents. And I honestly have been at far too many meetings where I can't even tell you how hard it is for me to stand here because I feel like so many people have come to the microphone and been told, make it quick, we have a full agenda, and yet I too was at the Hope Valley Middle School at the last meeting, and I listened to a developer go on and on and on and on without any suggestion from the chair that perhaps the 100 or so people in the room should be respected and given an opportunity to come to the microphone and be heard. And so I hate it when residents are in the audience and they're yelling out their comments and they're frustrated. And I try to maintain a calm demeanor and I come in with my knitting every meeting, and when I put down my knitting and pick up my pen, you know I'm about to blow a gasket. And so here's the gasket being blown. I just have random bullets here that I'm going to read, and most of them actually other people have said, but I'm going to say it again because it seems like there's the appearance from the people at the front of the room that if no one's saying anything, they're not thinking it. And So, what about respect for Tom Halliburton? What about the respect for the townspeople who were insulted by Harvey Buford in his letter to the Westerly Sun, totally dissing us as being backwards and so forth, where Tom was treated one way for quote-unquote being rude to a developer, where we have someone else on a town-appointed board that's attacking the residents. And I've not seen or heard any apology or any kind of attempt on the part of the town council to suggest that we deserve more respect than that. I agree that if the Maxim Hill people had understood that the town council wasn't going to stand up for them, they would have come out, and it sounds like they did come out at meetings that were adjourned or whatever, changed, and there was even like at Hope Valley, people came to speak about Chase Hill, but we were told at the beginning of the meeting that there was going to be no opportunity. That's not respectful. Even tonight, how long did we have to wait? We were told this was going to be a workshop where we could say what we wanted, we could yell at the town council, but that's not really what happened. 45 minutes into it, and none of the town residents were given an opportunity to speak. It's the Monday after Thanksgiving, it's a cold night, we really don't want to be here. So if we're here, we're committed and we have something to say. And I just don't think that the townspeople do get the same opportunity as the developers. And it's disrespectful. I think the only other thing I'm going to say before I either answer your questions or sit down is I'm also aware that the school committee or the school budget is the elephant in the room and that the town needs more revenue. But I don't think there's any excuse for putting programs in place and approving solar manufacturing that's bad environmental policy to raise money when people like me have moved to this town because we want a rural community that is beautiful to look at and drive through, and suddenly the rug is being pulled out from underneath us and we're being sold out down the river for something that we are going to regret. We're going to live to regret the clear cutting of trees and destroying that land. I do believe that. That's all.
Can I just address a couple of comments?
Sure.
Okay. First was the meeting on the Chase Hill project. Just so you know, and so everyone knows, the process in place for the hearings is for the applicant to bring forward their project to the council. I was very upfront at that meeting, okay? That because of my phone conversation with the lead attorney, he had 5 witnesses. I wasn't sure that we'd get to public comment, so I wanted to let folks know, okay? We have transcripts for these meetings too, so again, all I can do is have them present their project, okay? We're required by law to hear the project, okay? And again, public comment will always be welcome, whether it's at a subsequent meeting or not. It's never been denied. I try to limit as best I can, but again, the project developer has to present their project to us as a legislative body, okay? It's not the project to the residents, okay? Just so we delineate that, okay? It's very important delineation.
And I understand that, but it does seem to me that when he's going on and on with the property owner and the same old questions over and over again, when Joe Moreau gets up here and maybe sometimes he repeats himself, he might be called on the carpet for that. So there is a double standard.
But again, I want to clarify.
Okay, so he has the right to be repetitive?
No. Usually when Joe makes his comments, it's at public forum, so that's generally a more restrictive time frame than a hearing. A hearing, we have to hear the whole developer's project, and through whatever witnesses they'll have to testify. So it's a completely separate form.
But for that, where he was interviewing the property owner, that didn't really seem to me like presenting his project. It seemed like he was putting forward why it is that they were willing to split zone their land and do all these other things. But it didn't really feel like presenting the project to me. It looked like stalling, quite honestly. Then we took a break, and nobody was coming back from the break, and there were all these people wanting to talk. It just felt like...
I can assure you, I know Steve Serda, and it was not a stall tactic. It was his way of presenting the project from the residents' perspective. They're the ones that are going to maintain it, be on the property, and that was really important for him to present. So I could not limit that. It wasn't fair to do that. So that's really wasn't there intentionally to limit.
But I guess my point is that if you're raising kids and your spare time is at a minimum, and so you come out and you're interested, so you sit there for 3 hours, quite frankly, it felt like an eternity. And then you're told that it's going to be continued now, and if you want to be heard, you have to make time again and maybe get a babysitter, or maybe there's Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts that night. I agree with what Sharon has in her document, that they should be given a time limit to present a proposal. You shouldn't need 3 hours. And I too, you want to engage me in conversation, I'll just stay up here until you shut the lights off. But I thought that when the solar ordinance was passed last January with the 3% or 3 acres, that this was going to be an end to us having to come out and express our opinion over and over and over again. Not that we're NIMBYs, but that we are against spot zoning in residential areas, and we are for responsible development. But these solar projects that are coming before us, that we want to come out and speak up for our town, they're not good for our town. And so with that ordinance, we're still talking about 60-acre projects or more. And I thought that was going to be the end of that.
The ordinance was amended in January 22nd of this year. Okay? So there were a handful of projects that were deemed complete prior to that date. That's why we're hearing Chase Hill.
Chase Hill was deemed
Complete prior to January 22nd.
The application was.
The application was complete.
That's why it is.
So they're left over. All of these, there's going to be 5 more. There's 5 more that we have to listen to.
Well, we're hoping that they'll change their mind.
Right.
We're hoping that they're getting the message that enough is enough, and that they'll just not even spend any more money and won't pursue any more solar. So we'll see.
I have a question on comment here. Frank is right that the developer is there to present to us, but the developer is also there to present to you, so you can hear the entire project before you make your comments. So are you suggesting that perhaps the better approach that you all may like is that you talk first and leave, and then we listen to the developer?
I would like to say that that comment is extremely disrespectful, and is exactly why I'm standing here right now.
We don't need any more divisive comments, okay?
But that wasn't,
That was not divisive. Listen, this is,
you really didn't mean it that way.
no, I
I
didn't.
think.
It's that if we're here, we have to be here to listen to a developer present a project. If you really just want to make a comment and not listen to the project, which is okay, then we could let you speak first so that you could have your whatever you want to say, and then you could leave and we could listen to the project after that. So, I mean, it's a perfectly valid way of doing it if that's something that people would like to.
Well, it isn't, so I'm gonna take this question in the spirit that I think you're trying to say it, and say that, okay, when the meeting opens, Frank asks if there's any public comment, and so I guess to your point, except at the Hopeville, the meeting last Monday, there wasn't any because of the number of witnesses that were going to be called. But no, in general, I think people are interested in understanding what it is that the developer is selling. We just think that they should shorten their sales pitch. I'm speaking for myself. I don't mean to speak
Which
for
is
people.
what I said,
And
a long
I agree.
time ago, I said, if the developer could give us the information ahead of time, the council, ahead of time, when we had the meeting, they could be limited to either an hour and a half presentation, and we would have an hour and a half comments, and we would be done.
Because I do disagree, you know, people say, I understand what you're saying, that yes, you do say, is there anybody that wants to speak, but I have to tell you, it's extremely intimidating standing up here, and not everyone's going to put up with it.
Yeah. I have a suggestion I mentioned to Joe via email a day or two ago, maybe today, I forget. But, you know, if anyone has any real concerns or questions that they want asked of the developer, we obviously get a chance to do that ahead of the public comment period. You're welcome to email any one of us, and we'll ask for you. So this way you get the questions answered, you're in the audience.
Right, but
And then
no,
I'm just trying
meeting.
to facilitate, you know, answering some of your questions while you're there, because we may not get to that public comment period.
But the public comment is extremely important because it's on the record. And also, there are people that can't come out to the meetings and are watching on the cable access channel or whatever. And so anything that's going on, you know, email or you know, in private correspondence, it's just become something that I know, and maybe there are others that would like to know, and I think everyone should hear it at the same time. So I'm just saying that I think that there is a very divisive tone to a lot of these meetings, and I've seen a number of residents come and stand where I am, much as they probably want to be here as much as I do, and express a willingness to work together. And I would just say that I second, third, fourth, and fifth that. But I would say you need to take a look in the mirror too, in terms of demonstrating respect for the townspeople. Thank you.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Can I sit down?
Yeah. You know, and I've said this before, the way zoning operates, you could do what that zoning allows you in that area. The town council has no legal requirement, and I'll stand corrected, to change zoning to accommodate any landowner, period. And number two, and I say the town council has certain powers that the planning board does, but when the planning board routinely, unanimously recommends against something, that should tell you something. Those two basic things. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Yes, and we got time for, trying to close it, wrap it up at 10 if we can, folks. A little bit before 10.
Actually, it wasn't going to comment, but that last bit made me want to, just on a matter of process, to riff off of what Mr. Hurst is saying, when a developer proposes something to the town and the planning board unanimously rejects it, the project is dead. The town council does not owe the developer a hearing, and it's not legally required to hear the details of a
And let me
project.
correct you. When the planning board issues an advisory opinion,
Yeah.
it's not a decision, it's an opinion. We can take it or we don't have to take it. That's the law. Okay, that's the town charter, state law. We don't have to take the opinion, as we have not in some instances, some we have. Okay, so that's completely false.
Okay.
But if it is, sorry, if they do offer a negative
Advisory opinion, correct.
then you need a supermajority.
That is incorrect.
That's, I've read, that's right in the ordinance, though, I've read
No,
that.
it's in the charter.
It's in the chart, it's not, it's a simple majority, you're wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay, I guess I disagree on the
That's fine,
interpretation.
we can disagree, that's fine, I'm just letting you know that's what it is.
Okay,
Just so we get the facts out, that's all I'm interested in.
okay. Another thing I wanted to mention, specifically related to Chase Hill and the public comment, one thing related to the communication is, like others have alluded to, it's really difficult to get all those people to come back to another meeting after it's continued. So having the developer speak, or any developer for that matter, it's not specific to Chase Hill, having them speak for roughly 3 hours it frustrates the openness of the public process, because now it's going to be really difficult to get as many interested parties to return to that meeting when it's reheld. Also, the developer still has not provided the public information that they presented to you all and promised to leave at the clerk's office. And that meeting is happening, I think, like a week from today or something. So we still don't have it, and we want to review it. So I think there should be some better standards
I
for the
don't know what you're
developers.
talking about. Could you explain? The information that we all got at our meeting.
Yeah.
Which, the hearing.
It's Chase Hill.
Yes.
Yes.
Steve did not give the copies to the clerk.
Oh, okay. Right.
So we,
We'll make
Which
sure.
word?
There was a binder,
Yes.
and he indicated that he would bring binders to the town hall.
For folks to review.
Closed Thursday, Friday last week.
Right. So that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Okay.
okay, thank you. Okay. I just want to, one last comment on the planning board loop that we're all in with, whether the town council can just ignore the planning board and stuff. I think that if we had a process, which is how I read the ordinance, where a developer comes in, proposes something to the planning board, and the planning board says, well, we don't really think that's consistent with the comprehensive plan, what that does is create a more organic back and forth between the developer and the planning board, gives them incentive to revise their plans to make them consistent with the comprehensive plan, and do that work with the planning board to work out a lot of the details of the project. Many of those details you all had questions and have had questions from the developers in these town council hearings. All of that information, all of those contingencies and details would have been worked out with the planning board if we had this, I call it like a natural selection process, right? Like the project the planning board finds that it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, so the developer goes back to the drawing board and says, okay, let's figure out how we can make it consistent with the comprehensive plan, resubmit it to the planning board, and start working from there. That saves everyone a ton of time, because then we don't have these lengthy town council hearings where you guys are negotiating on behalf of the planning board for a project that now, if you approve, has to go back to the planning board, who already unanimously rejected it, or sometimes just rejected it just based on votes, in a kind of an incredibly awkward situation. Now they have to, address this developer as a legitimate applicant. So that's just my 2 cents. The last thing I'll say is that I'm getting a little bit concerned about cumulative impacts. And that's something we talk about a lot in the environmental field, but when we start to have multiple solar developments in town, now we're turning down every street and we see solar. Not to mention the effect on the residents, which is really what I'm thinking about when I think about cumulative impacts. This is a planning board issue, I know, but I just want to talk about it in this open workshop. That's something that I think we should take seriously. We're looking at residents who might be surrounded by multiple solar farms, whether they're by right or they're parcels that have been rezoned. And that's a really serious concern, because now you have individuals who could be very adversely impacted. And we should start thinking about how we quantify those, weigh the costs and benefits of those. We probably know benefits, but assess that in a more holistic way and through a more complete planning process. That's all.
Thank you, Emily. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask some questions. My name is David Bonder. I live on Town Road. How much research have you done on these solar panels as far as what's in them and what environmental impact they fail? Even one of them. Do you have any idea what's inside of them?
Well, we do get that information.
Yeah, there's nickel, cadmium.
Oh, yes, the details,
Pretty bad
yes.
stuff in there, okay? And when you get a large project like going up on Mexican Road, after so many years they fail, what kind of a maintenance project do they have to keep this up when they fail and clean it up?
There's a decommissioning process?
Well, I'm talking about while it's in operation.
They also have a catch.
That's for the
Yeah,
grounds.
yeah. It goes,
They
They come 3 or
There's a
4
maintenance
times a
plan.
year. There's
There is some sort of maintenance
It's a
plan.
maintenance plan.
They
Yeah.
come 3 or 4 times a year for maintenance.
Well,
And they are maintaining it, and they pay attention to it.
I've worked for a corporation and they don't always do what they're supposed to.
We have the maintenance plans, we hold them accountable to those.
I have messed up loans because of it, so I know firsthand. I'm only hoping that they do what they're supposed to do, because if they don't, our grandchildren are going to clean this mess up. And whatever they're throwing out there to recycle this stuff, I've been in the plastic industry a long time. It costs a lot of money to clean that up, a lot more than what they're proposed to do. I don't have the figures. I'm like Popeye. I am what I am, and I am who I am. You know, that's it. But that's what I have to say. I really feel that this may come back and bite us in 20 or 25 years. Our water purifier is right over there too. That's what a lot of, before you approve any of these things, you should be looking at things like that. I was against the gas station. That's just not responsible. I'm really against this from what I've seen, but it's too late. I do appreciate that you're trying to reduce our taxes, but I think this was not thought out well. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
I gotta leave, I got a date at the hospital, so I'm out of here.
Good luck.
Thank you.
How many more folks want to speak, just so I get a sense? Tammy? All right, so one more, okay.
I'm Edward Lowe from Brook Drive in Hope Valley. I think the point that Mr. Hurst and Mr. Pennypacker were bringing up is that our need for revenue never justifies illegal spot zoning of commercial, solar, industrial projects in a residential area. You've taken that mantle on, you've twisted it, you've said, well, we need the revenue, therefore we can do this illegal act, and you can't. Then when residents, after you've done that act and you've planted this giant solar farm in the middle of a residential area, and there's all these process problems that develop, trucks running down narrow country roads, and the residents tell you, hey, this shouldn't have happened in the first place, but it's happening, and you deflect that. You say, oh, the project's in litigation. You can't talk about it. It's a process problem. It's not a specifics problem. And you're refusing to address these process problems by referring to litigation or by limiting public comment during the public comment. You only got 5 minutes, so hurry up. You gotta. Is the affront that people are talking about here. You need to change you have to own what you've done. You have to own that you have illegally spot zoned commercial, industrial, solar power plants in a residential area. And the ancillary problems you have to address. You can't defer to the police. You can't defer to the planner. You can't say, well, call town hall, call the building official, and we'll see what we can do. And to the point about the costs that are involved, you and the town manager and the town planner all want this. What's the cost of doing that? Simply because you first spot zoned it.
Ed, that's your opinion, so just so you know. We feel differently, so.
I think that I wanted to bring up solar decommissioning. Right now, what you've done is you've said that we're going to estimate, or we're going to allow the developer to estimate what these decommissioning costs are going to be. I don't want to discuss deforestation or reforestation, that's already been discussed. These decommissioning, this bond, no one has any way of accurately predicting the future decommissioning costs of these giant projects. And by accepting a bond at some unknown rate that's proposed by the developer with no backup, with no audit, and with no concurrent engineering review or technical review to say, yes, this is right, or no, this is way wrong, such as just was done with the town engineering firm and the reforestation. They said, no, this reforestation is 4 times greater than what is proposed by the developer. So you're allowing developers to make a one-time payment into a cash escrow account, which you say is going to grow over time, in order to fund a responsibility. But nobody knows what these decommissioning costs are actually going to be. And this arrangement that you've allowed actually has the effect of limiting the developer's risk and transferring all of that risk onto the town, onto future generations. And that's what you're hearing again and again and again. And you're not addressing that, or you're refusing to address it, or you don't believe it. If decommissioning costs are more than the escrow at some future date, the town is going to eat the difference. There's no money anywhere else for that to come from. What we should do, and what we must do, and what we're going to propose to the planning board on Wednesday, is that the developers need to pay for a performance bond from a reputable insurance firm that will ensure that the terms of a decommissioning contract are met at the cost, at the time that the decommissioning is actually going to happen. Then we don't have to worry about the expense or the financial standing of some entity 30 years from now. And any other arrangement subjects us to open-ended financial risk. In your work, you know that. The existing, I think that there's a massive underfunding problem in the decommissioning costs. Massive. Just in looking what Mr. Bibler did in his looking at, from reputable sources, what the recycling costs are going to be, and comparing those to what's held in escrow for decommissioning, it doesn't account for labor, it doesn't account for packaging, it doesn't account for shipping, it doesn't account for escalation of recycling costs from present day value. The numbers that he's coming up with are millions and millions and millions of dollars. We need to change that escrow. We can't continue this way. It's a huge risk. Go, go, go.
I said that. I said we have to do it differently than we did it in the past. And really, nobody knows what it should cost right now.
Insurance companies have a very...
Even if you put it in you said a performance bond, but who's going to determine what that quantity should be?
It's probably an actuary.
But I don't know. I mean, you really have no idea, because nobody's ever decommissioned this stuff yet.
But what I'm saying is the present method of the town council approving some amount to be held in escrow, which will hopefully grow and will hopefully cover that cost,
Right, I agree.
is not the way to go. It isn't. We need to change that.
The other thing I was going to say is that the decommissioning bonds that we have accepted in the past, we can't change those. So we just have to learn from our mistakes, and that's...
I think his idea of the performance bond,
I think it's great.
that's something that works, through the finance office, maybe another approach for that. At the same time, all of the decommissioning costs for the solar at this point may also change in 30 years, and it might be less rather than more. From the companies that actually recycle, because recycling costs are going down. So I think it's a really good proposal. I think it's an interesting proposal that should be followed up on. Yeah. Because I think it changes on both sides. In 30 years, we don't know what it will be on either side.
Well, I don't think it's going to ever go down. I don't.
So what I'm hearing is that the town council does not consider that the decommissioning reserve is set in stone for Maxon Hill.
Oh, it is in
It is
for
for Maxon Hill.
It's an approved project.
They accepted, that's part of the ordinance now, right? That number
I
is part of the
read
ordinance.
the wording of the ordinance provides latitude for the planning board to set its own requirements for decommissioning. I think that
But
you've
that
assumed...
specific ordinance for Maxon Hill, every time we have approve a project that's not in its common zone, we create an ordinance. And that ordinance for Maxim Hill has the dollars in it
Yeah, it has a separate.
of what the decommissioning is going to be. It's part of that ordinance.
But
But going
that was
forward-
set as a result of the town council
agree.
assuming the authority, that it had the authority, and it precluded the planning board from executing its responsibility to set that amount. That was leveraged by the council
And we're not,
in
you
a,
know, we're not gonna fight about
Beyond
who's
that.
responsible between planning board and council, so.
But
you
it's
have your thoughts
there,
and
it's
we
there
have
now.
ours.
They're not gonna go for a change.
I strongly disagree with that interpretation. I really do. Because the ordinance says that the planning board does have latitude to set its own requirements for decommission. And the fact that you precluded them from doing that is, you've usurped their responsibility and their authority. And that's improper.
I disagree, actually.
I think that we wouldn't be where we are if we had never gone down the road of spot zoning. And I think that a difference, I don't agree that it's just a difference of opinion. I think that the reason that we're looking forward to 5 more of these gigundo projects here in town is a result of your adopting the mantle that, hey, we'll consider rezoning industrial power plants in a residential area. You've encouraged this, and yet you've pushed back against residents who say that you should not do that spot zoning is illegal. And you gloss over that point time and time again. That's all I have to say.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
All right, mine's real quick. Ron Bryant, 8 Prince Barber Drive. Again, talking about decommission, prices have been developed on what it costs to decommission because they've been doing it in China and India and Japan for quite a long time. In the US, it kind of works out to about $10 to $20 a panel. So if you do your math on that one, what that is going to equate to. However, that does not include any contamination of soil. So I implore you, as you look forward to the newer projects, the cadmium and all the nasty chemicals in these things. A panel gets broken from hail, vandalism, or just the weather strip breaks. They're going to check it 4 times a year. That's 3 months. You got rain coming down on it, washing that stuff into the dirt. Make sure you include costs in there for check for contaminated soils and remediation to make sure that gets away. Hopefully it does not get into our water system because that'll be a real problem. China's been doing this for a long time, and they have found that it's too expensive to recycle. They send all their panels to the Middle East. They'll take panels which are not very efficient and stick them out there, take lots and lots and lots of land, and they want the energy cheap, so they're taking all these old panels from China instead of recycling. So again, be very much aware of that. And the other question I have for you, discussions about Francis Barber Drive and the Stone Hill project. I gave you guys information on the fire, environmental, and chemical dangers of solar panels. Does that have to be resubmitted for every project that comes up, or because I gave it to you once, you take that into advisement on all future ones?
Well, I guess it would be helpful if you gave it to the clerk and had it inserted with all new projects.
Each project?
Yeah, it'd be
Okay,
helpful.
I can do
We
that.
get a lot of paper.
Okay, and last question is, when does the school budget start?
January.
January?
Right in the beginning, it's the first week in January,
Okay,
literally. I think it's like the 3rd.
okay, that's it, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Jamie?
I'll be fast. People have already kind of, first, Tammy Ross, 229 Woodville Road. Other people have already mentioned the things that I wanted to talk about, but I just want to reiterate them. I hope that everything that you've heard from people who have come to these meetings, not just tonight, but all of the meetings, that you've really listened to their concerns, and that going forward, we won't be having these same kinds of conversations, whether it's for the Skunk Hill project or any of these other ones that come up. I hope that we have learned that maybe we didn't know as much as we thought we knew when we made the decision to approve these things. So that's kind of my one big thing. I wanted to reiterate the concern about the cash escrow for the decommissioning. I absolutely think that having developers pay for a performance bond is far preferable. It will make sure that the town does not incur this liability. I mean, that could bankrupt us. We want to talk about we can't afford the schools. Talk about them walking away from Maxon Hill at some time down the road. There's not going to be enough there to cover that. And we're going to be paying for it, and our children are going to be paying for it, and our grandchildren will be paying for it. And then lastly, Emily, I think, made a really good comment about this process. You know, the planning board and the members of the planning board are definitely experts when it comes to all of these things. And they are much better situated to be able to be making decisions about things. You know, I appreciate the fact that the council sits there and listens to the developers, but, you know, not everybody sitting up there knows as much as the people on the planning board. And I really think that her suggestion that the planning board be involved in the process if they reject something, that the council just says, okay, we're not going to hear this, and let them go back and they can revise their plans to make it consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think we would have prevented a lot of problems. We might still have projects. I'm not saying that Maxon Hill or any of these other things wouldn't have happened, but they would have looked very different. And that might have been more palatable to a whole lot of people in town and saved a lot of us a lot of time, effort, animosity, division, and all these things that really are not good for our town. So that's all I'm going to say. Good enough.
Thank you, Tammy. Have a motion to adjourn, please.
We don't need the workshop. I'll make a motion, we adjourn then.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.